In the previous episode, Qin Mu fled Heaven Wave City as chaos erupted behind him. A terrifying Devil King descended, turning the city into a slaughterhouse, crushing armies and sect masters alike, and raising a sacrificial altar from blood and bones. Caught in the violent shockwaves of divine arts, Qin Mu was badly injured and separated from his companions, barely escaping with Hu Ling'er alive. Deep in the forest, danger struck again when Long Jiaonan appeared, revealing a shocking transformation and an inhuman power that pushed Qin Mu to the brink, forcing him to flee once more. At the end of the previous episode, the sky above Heaven Wave City tore open as countless heavenly devils poured down, feeding the altar and empowering the Devil King, while Qin Mu realized in horror that his actions might have unleashed a disaster far greater than he ever imagined. What will happen next? Stay tuned. And the story continues. Long Jiaonan also hesitated for a moment, and the vortex which was currently above Heaven Wave City had already become a passage to another world. The sky above Heaven Wave City twisted violently as the vortex fully stabilized. No longer unstable energy, but a true gateway linking two worlds. From it, heavenly devils poured down endlessly, each wave stronger than the last, their dark bodies blotting out the light as they fell like a living storm. Standing upon the sacrificial altar, the Dushan Devil King spread his 8 arms wide, his voice shaking heaven and earth as he called for his people to abandon their ruined world and seize this fertile land. He promised beauty, food, and weak enemies, urging the heavenly devils to trample everything beneath their feet. Long Jiaonan watched in despair. Her father lay crushed beneath the Devil King's feet, his flood dragon collapsed and unable to rise. Another cult master level expert had already been slain, his severed head held aloft like a trophy. In that moment, she felt a crushing sorrow, wondering if the Dragon Rider sect was truly about to be erased from history. Chaos erupted everywhere. Heavenly devils rained from the sky, slaughtering fleeing soldiers. Qin Mu himself was blasted out of the air and slammed into the ground. Several heavenly devils crashed down around him, rising with savage roars. This scene was not unfamiliar to him. In the Great Ruins, he had faced these creatures before. Their bodies were strong and grotesque, their vital energy twisted, their techniques strange yet crude compared to human divine arts. Qin Mu moved instantly. He flashed to the side of one heavenly devil and severed its head in a single strike. Another lashed out with a scorpion tail, narrowly missing his neck. Qin Mu pierced the tail with his sword finger, then formed a mudra and tore the soul from a charging devil, shattering it into fragments. A cow-headed heavenly devil challenged him in devil speech, dragging a massive blade across the ground as sparks flew. Qin Mu answered without hesitation, his vital energy surging as he activated his overlord body technique. Before the clash could happen, a gigantic snake smashed down from above, crushing the cow-headed devil into pulp. Long Jiaonan had arrived, her huge serpent sweeping through dozens of enemies like an iron pillar. Yet even she, stronger by several realms, was soon overwhelmed as countless devils continued to descend. Qin Mu and Hu Ling'er were forced into a desperate defense, surrounded by tornadoes and ambushes as more devils poured in, covering the sky like black flies. Cold sweat slid down Qin Mu's face. He realized that this disaster was beyond his ability to resolve. Then suddenly, brilliant light erupted from the southern horizon. Sword lights streaked across the sky, growing brighter and closer. Wherever they passed, heavenly devils fell headless, their bodies raining down lifelessly. Qin Mu looked up in shock. What he saw was not a single sword, but vast sword groups formed from countless flying blades. There were millions of them, impossible to count, each shining with dazzling brilliance. At their center, thousands of tiny sword pellets spun like moons, continuously releasing waves of flying swords that slaughtered every devil in the sky with flawless precision. In moments, the black sky was cleansed, leaving only corpses falling like rain. Within Heaven Wave City, the Dushan Devil King roared in fury. He hastened the summoning of his true body, using chanting devils and mountains of corpses to pull himself further into this world. A colossal foot emerged from the vortex, wrapped in burning devil flames that stained the sky crimson. The sword groups immediately changed direction and surged toward the city, their scale nearly matching Heavenwave City itself. The Devil King raised all 8 arms, forming a massive black barrier that covered the heavens. When swords struck the barrier, an unbearable metallic scream exploded outward. People bled from their ears. Deafened instantly, Qin Mu could no longer hear anything, seeing devils around him clutching their heads in agony. Even across the river in Martial Order County, soldiers suffered from the distant shock, though it remained barely bearable. High atop the city tower, Duke Wei stared in disbelief. The Imperial Preceptor of Eternal Peace calmly observed the battlefield, recognizing the sword wielder as someone whose strength rivaled his own. He stated that the summoning of the Devil King, though horrific, had spared countless soldiers by sacrificing Heavenwave City instead. As they spoke, the Imperial Preceptor stepped forward, walking toward the opposite shore. Back in the city, the Devil King's wooden body began to fail. The endless sword attacks shredded his palms. This was not his true body, only a wooden manifestation sustained by limited energy transferred through Qin Mu. Then a single sword light flew straight at him, carrying a terrifyingly pure intent. The Devil King beheld it like a perfect painting, understanding the depth of the sword path within it. In that instant of awe, his head was severed. The black barrier collapsed. The Devil King's corpse fell apart. The sword groups retreated, flying back into the sword pellets, which hovered calmly in the sky. A wooden chest appeared, its lid opening as every sword pellet flew back inside with crisp metallic sounds. The Imperial Preceptor stared at the chest, deep in thought, as the vortex in the sky shrank and the Devil King's true body was forced to withdraw, releasing an unwilling roar from beyond the heavens. Outside the city, Qin Mu stared at the wooden chest, a sense of familiarity stirring within him. He remembered a similar chest in the village smithy, filled with what he had been told were ordinary silver pellets. As the chest descended into a forest, Qin Mu sprinted after it. There, he found an elderly man in cotton clothing, a forging furnace strapped to his back, his face etched with the hardships of time. The man held the wooden chest and turned toward Qin Mu with a wide, silent smile. When the elder in cotton clothing saw him run over, he gave a wide grin and there was no tongue in his mouth. Grandpa Mute. Qin Mu immediately hurried over and opened his arms to hug that elder in cotton clothing. He wanted to hug him up, but this elder was like the heaviest mountain in the world and he was unable to lift him up at all. Qin Mu laughed loudly, his voice filled with joy and disbelief. He gathered all his strength and tried again. But no matter how hard he tried, he still could not lift the old man even a little. Grandpa Mute made 2 simple sounds, placed the wooden chest on the ground, and only then did Qin Mu finally manage to hug him up, spinning him around twice before tossing him gently aside. Grandpa Mute landed on the ground, stood up calmly, patted the dust from his clothes, and gestured that Qin Mu was being too mischievous. Qin Mu was both excited and curious. He quickly asked why Grandpa Mute had left the village, how he had come all the way here, and how he could be so powerful just now. He asked whether the sword pellets in the chest were forged by him and whether anyone else from the village had come along. Grandpa Mute responded with a series of sounds and hand signs, his expressions shifting rapidly. He acted out sleeping, then walking, his hands moving so fast that Qin Mu's eyes could barely follow. Qin Mu quickly stopped him, admitting that he could not keep up and asking where Grandpa Deaf was. Grandpa Mute's face brightened with pride as he gestured that he had sneaked out of the village secretly without telling anyone. Qin Mu blinked, then smiled, telling him that Grandpa Butcher, Grandpa Blind, and Granny C had already left the village as well. Grandpa Mute was clearly shocked, then chuckled silently in amusement. Grandpa Mute lifted the wooden chest toward Qin Mu, signaling for him to help carry it. Qin Mu immediately refused, remembering clearly how heavy the chest was. He complained that the sword pellets were already frighteningly heavy, and the chest itself was even worse. He said that if he tried to carry it, his shoulders would be dislocated and he would collapse on the ground. Grandpa Mute responded with a mischievous grin and gave him a thumbs up, just as he often did back in the village when teasing him. At that moment, Grandpa Mute's expression changed slightly as he looked past Qin Mu. Qin Mu turned around and saw a middle-aged man walking toward them. It was the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He stopped a short distance away and looked calmly at Grandpa Mute, asking whether he was a person from a previous generation. Grandpa Mute replied with hand signs and a grin. The Imperial Preceptor frowned, clearly unable to understand him. Qin Mu explained that Grandpa Mute meant he was not from a previous generation and still considered himself young. The Imperial Preceptor frowned again, uncomfortable at having to rely on Qin Mu to translate. The Imperial Preceptor then spoke with admiration, saying that Grandpa Mute's ability was extraordinary, yet what he cultivated was not sword skill. He admitted that despite seeing countless divine arts, he had never encountered anything like this before and asked to personally experience it. Qin Mu was astonished. He had seen Grandpa Mute command countless sword pellets that transformed into endless flying swords, forcing even the Dushan Devil King into defense. Yet the Imperial Preceptor claimed that this was not even the true nature of his path. Grandpa Mute fastened the forging furnace to his back, placed the wooden chest on the ground, and prepared to demonstrate. He gestured that his skill was almost lost to the world and that he hoped the Imperial Preceptor might one day find a suitable successor. The Imperial Preceptor bowed slightly, deeply moved by such generosity. When the chest was opened, it revealed countless sword pellets, each no larger than a thumb. Grandpa Mute stretched out his palm, and the pellets suddenly changed. They liquefied into something that looked like water but shone like light, flowing together into a radiant silver substance. This liquid light rose from the chest and spread across Grandpa Mute's body, forming armor that covered him completely. Strange runes and formations appeared across its surface, all clearly focused on defense. The liquid light then flowed away from his body and gathered in mid-air, transforming into a massive bell dozens of yards tall. Ancient characters, star maps, and strange beasts appeared on its surface as it slowly rotated. In an instant, the bell dissolved into light and became a silver dragon that coiled through the air, its body covered in glowing patterns. The dragon surged upward and transformed into a longsword, displaying profound sword techniques before changing again into a massive shield, then into a silver umbrella that drifted gently downward. The sword pellets could become weapons, treasures, and even take the form of divine arts themselves. Qin Mu was completely stunned. This was the first time he had ever seen Grandpa Mute reveal his true ability, something he had never shown in the village and never taught him. The Imperial Preceptor stood speechless, utterly captivated. Then the liquid light gathered once more and became a silver boat. Grandpa Mute tossed the wooden chest onto it, leapt aboard, waved at Qin Mu with a broad grin, and vanished into the sky in an instant. Qin Mu opened his mouth, wanting to call him back, but ultimately said nothing. After a long moment, the Imperial Preceptor finally exhaled and praised the ability as truly supreme. He asked Qin Mu if he knew this man. Qin Mu simply replied that he was his elder. The Imperial Preceptor misunderstood, assuming Qin Mu came from a powerful and mysterious background. Qin Mu did not deny it, only nodding silently. The Imperial Preceptor then asked who had summoned the Devil God. Qin Mu denied knowing anything, claiming he had only just arrived and nearly died himself. The Imperial Preceptor questioned why Qin Mu was so far from his intended destination, and Qin Mu awkwardly let Hu Ling'er explain. She claimed they had escaped by floating down the river after encountering danger. The Imperial Preceptor did not argue. He explained calmly that the one who summoned the Devil God had achieved both great merit and great sin. Revealing this act would bring both reward and eventual punishment. Therefore, he chose to conceal the truth so that no merit and no blame would fall upon the summoner. Qin Mu quickly agreed, relieved. As the aftermath of battle settled, the Imperial Preceptor spoke quietly about contrarians, those who killed with words rather than blades. He explained that even success would bring endless condemnation and that his own reform would likely cause him to be cursed for generations. He spoke of a Tao friend who once comforted him, someone now gone. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferent, "Even if I succeed in my reform, I would also be scolded by the contrarians for the next hundreds and thousands of years." I once had a Dao friend who could console my heart. His expression turned dim, but he has left. I miss him very much. Qin Mu was stunned and didn't know who this Dao friend was. However, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor disclosing his worry to him made his hair stood on end. He felt he could be gotten rid of any time. Silencing him. Qin Mu's heart tightened for a brief moment. The Imperial Preceptor had spoken too openly, too honestly, for someone standing at the peak of power. Such confessions were dangerous. Qin Mu instinctively felt that knowing too much could invite death, yet the Imperial Preceptor seemed to see through his thoughts at a glance. With a calm and leisurely tone, he reassured Qin Mu that there was no need to worry. He explained that he had merely felt a surge of emotion and needed someone to listen. Qin Mu, he said, was a good listener. He even joked that if Duke Wei were present, he would never dare to speak so freely, since everything would spread throughout the imperial court by the next day. This made Qin Mu blink in surprise. Duke Wei, a first-ranking high official, was actually a blabbermouth? Thinking of Wei Yong's non-stop chatter, Qin Mu suddenly felt everything made sense. It seemed talkativeness truly ran in the family. The Imperial Preceptor continued calmly, saying that Qin Mu, despite holding the rank of 6th-ranking Imperial Academician, was not part of the Imperial Court itself. That made conversations with him safe. More importantly, no one would ever believe the words of a devil cult master from Heavenly Devil Cult. Hearing this, Qin Mu's expression darkened slightly. Even though the cult had a decent reputation among commoners, in the eyes of officials and the martial world, it was still viewed with deep suspicion. At that moment, several generals approached and reported that Heavenwave City had been fully suppressed. The Imperial Preceptor nodded. The generals glanced at Qin Mu with curiosity. Unsure who this young man was, the Imperial Preceptor introduced him as the first Imperial Academician of the dynasty. The generals were immediately impressed. Qin Mu looked young, but steady and reliable, and they praised him as someone wise beyond his years. Qin Mu returned their greetings politely, maintaining a calm smile. The Imperial Preceptor then turned his gaze southward. His eyes carried a cold glint as he spoke of the coming battles. This clash, he said, was merely a warning. What followed would be the true test. His words made the generals feel a chill in their hearts. Soon after, the Imperial Preceptor began issuing commands. Despite his pale face from lingering injuries, his authority was unquestionable. He ordered one general to ride south and deliver a message to the rebels. They were to be given two choices. The first was simple and brutal. The Imperial army would march in full force, crush their sects, slaughter their families, and erase them completely. This was the law of the Imperial Court. The second choice followed the rules of the martial world. The rebels could gather their forces, challenge the Imperial side openly, and decide life and death through combat. If they won, they could kill the officials. If they lost, they would die. On the surface, it sounded fair, but Qin Mu could clearly sense the pressure behind these words. There was never truly a second choice. One general hesitated, worrying about the Imperial Preceptor's injuries and the danger of assassination. The Imperial Preceptor waved him off, calm and confident, and sent him on his way. Orders continued to flow. Troops were dispatched to fan out across the land, pushing forward relentlessly, suppressing rivers, lakes, and cities alike, advancing south with overwhelming force. Duke Wei and several high-ranking generals each received their missions, tasked with crushing key strongholds of the southern borders. When the orders were done, Duke Wei laughed loudly and asked what the Imperial Preceptor planned to do himself. The answer was simple. He would walk slowly behind the armies, giving the rebels time to make their decision, while also recovering from his injuries. Duke Wei immediately began rambling, loudly suggesting that Qin Mu treat the Imperial Preceptor. He even shared an embarrassing story about his wife secretly visiting Flower Alley to seek out the little divine physician, causing him great shock and a strange sense of excitement. Qin Mu froze, unsure how to respond, while the Imperial Preceptor coughed awkwardly and urged Duke Wei to focus on his mission. After Duke Wei left, the Imperial Preceptor sighed deeply and commented that the men of the Wei family all shared the same problem. Qin Mu could not help but feel sympathy. It seemed even someone as powerful as the imperial preceptor suffered greatly from Duke Wei's mouth. Qin Mu then tried to part ways, explaining that he needed to search for the scholars he had brought out for training. However, the imperial preceptor firmly refused. He insisted that Qin Mu accompany him to the southern borders and promised to help locate the missing scholars. Faced with such pressure, Qin Mu had no choice but to comply. With a wave of the imperial preceptor's hand, flames formed names in the sky, marking the scholars' locations. Before long, Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong, Yun Ke, and Xianxia arrived, all injured but alive. The dragon Qilin followed as well, carried by the wolf slave. The scholars were shocked to see the imperial preceptor and quickly bowed, fearing punishment for their involvement in the disaster. The imperial preceptor merely glanced over them, nodding slightly, even smiling at the dragon Qilin. Qin Mu immediately began treating everyone, using dragon saliva to heal their wounds. Hu Ling'er, ever mischievous, tried to charge them money, only to be stopped by Qin Mu, who insisted that a physician must not exploit patients. As the group recovered, Qin Mu gathered everyone and spoke solemnly. The training mission had changed. He would be following the imperial preceptor deep into enemy territory. It would be dangerous, far more dangerous than before. Anyone who wished to leave could do so now. The scholars hesitated. They understood the risks, yet also the opportunity. Before they could decide, the imperial preceptor spoke again, his voice calm but enticing. "Eternal peace, imperial preceptor said. I can give you guys pointers for your cultivation on this journey. The previous time I was invited by your Grand Chancellor and my lecture didn't last 2 days. This time I'm giving face to the imperial academician." These people's eyes lighted up instantly and Yun Ke chuckled. "Of course we must go deep into the southern borders and see if there are experts in the rebel army. We can't let these rebels look down on our imperial college." Qin Mu watched their excitement and could only shake his head inwardly. In his heart, he knew they were still underestimating the danger ahead. This road south was not a simple journey of experience or reputation. It was a road paved with blood, and there was no guarantee that anyone who stepped onto it would be able to walk to the end alive. Even so, there was no turning back now. Their lives and deaths would be left to fate, and everything would depend on whether Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor truly lived up to his title as the strongest man beneath the gods. The Imperial Preceptor dressed lightly and began walking south without hesitation. Qin Mu led the others to follow closely behind. Along the way, Qin Mu asked Xianxia about what had happened to them during the chaos of the battle. As he listened, he could not help but sigh again and again. Compared to Qin Mu himself, Xianxia, Chen Wanyan, and the others had been far luckier, though they were also blasted away by the power of the Dushan Devil King. They had not encountered terrifying experts like Long Jiaonan. Their survival owed much to the dragon Qilin. When it landed nearby, its massive body became a natural fortress. As the horde of heavenly devils descended, the group rushed to its side, fighting together while the dragon Qilin unleashed its astonishing battle strength. It tore through the devils like a living war machine, allowing Xianxia and the others to endure the calamity. Qin Mu looked at the dragon Qilin with amazement. Hu Ling'er leaned close and whispered mischievously that this big fellow had eaten and drunk their supplies all the way. Yet only now was it showing its worth. She even suggested squeezing more benefits out of it besides dragon saliva. Qin Mu nodded in agreement, his eyes glinting with calculation. As Heaven Wave City slowly receded into the distance behind them, Qin Mu turned his gaze back and reflected on the aftermath. With Eternal Peace Army entering the city, Long Jiaonan should have died at their hands. The Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect should have perished as well. It was a pity that the unique spells of Dragon Rider sect were lost. And even more regrettable that Qin Mu never managed to learn techniques like Devil Withdraw Command. That spell, meant specifically to drive summoned devils back to their realm, had almost succeeded before the Great Mountain sect was wiped out in an instant by the Dushan Devil King's overwhelming power. Behind them, Heaven Wave City was still in ruins. Soldiers repaired broken walls, cleared collapsed buildings, and transported debris out of the city. On the river, countless ships ferried troops across as the army continued marching south without pause. Those left behind hunted down remnants of the rebel forces and the lingering heavenly devils. They even discovered surviving commoners hiding among the ruins, comparing their faces one by one with bandit portraits. Among these survivors was a young woman in a dark green gown. Delicate and refined, clearly from a prestigious family. A soldier glanced at her beauty but soon moved on. What no one noticed was the red jade earring on her ear slowly stirring. It was not jade at all, but a tiny red snake. This woman was Long Jiaonan in disguise. If Qin Mu had been there, he would have recognized her instantly. He had seen her true form before, when she shed her skin, stripped of all disguise. Now, restored to a feminine appearance, she looked completely different from the handsome young master of Dragon Rider sect. Long Jiaonan followed the soldiers as they collected corpses and dumped them into massive burial pits outside the city. Crying softly, she asked whether her father's body was among them. The soldiers, overwhelmed by the countless dead, could only suggest she check the burial mounds. There, dozens of enormous pits were filled with thousands of corpses. Standing by one pit, Long Jiaonan suddenly cried out for her father. The soldiers thought her mad, until a weak voice answered from below. Alarm spread instantly. In that moment, the red snake dropped from her ear, transforming into a massive serpent that spewed poisonous mist. Soldiers collapsed one after another as it devoured them with terrifying speed. Long Jiaonan descended into the pit and uncovered the Dragon King, who had feigned death by entering hibernation. Though injured, he had survived, with the red dragon also answering his call. Father and child escaped together, carried away by the giant serpent. By the time Heaven Wave City realized what had happened, it was far too late. As they fled, the Dragon King asked who was responsible for the destruction of Dragon Rider sect. Long Jiaonan answered with hatred, naming academician Qin as the one who summoned the devil god and wiped them out. Though only the two of them remained, the Dragon King vowed revenge, swearing to tear Qin Mu into 1,000 pieces. Unaware of this, Qin Mu continued south with the imperial preceptor. As the army rushed past them, Qin Mu seized the chance to ask a question that had troubled him deeply. He spoke about cultivation, about how the spirit embryo realm felt powerful and refined, while the five elements realm seemed strangely weak, its immense potential difficult to unleash. His words immediately caught the attention of the others. They had all felt the same confusion. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor listened, astonished, then sighed heavily. He realized that Imperial College had failed to teach them the true secrets of the five elements. He explained patiently that the five elements divine treasure was also known as the five phases divine treasure, connected to the five elements star sovereigns in the heavens. These were not minor gods, but sovereign-level beings. When cultivators used their techniques, the strange energy descending from the sky was the resonance with these star sovereigns. With simple demonstrations, he manifested gold as a shining shield, wood as rampant vegetation, water as surging waves, fire as blazing clouds, and earth as floating stone. Each element responded naturally to his control. This power was different from spirit embryo control and different from the four directional vital energies. Once fully mastered, the five elements would integrate into one's vital energy, granting it five attributes at once. The scholars stared in shock, as if listening to a heavenly scripture. Seeing their blank expressions, the Imperial Preceptor could only shake his head in disbelief. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was bewildered and shook his head. The scholars of your batch is too dumb. The lousiest batch I have ever taught. Chen Wanyan and the rest received a huge blow, and xianxia also couldn't accept it. Qin Mu felt that it was not because they were too stupid but because Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was too clever. Qin Mu understood this gap very clearly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was a monster among monsters, an incomparable genius that appeared once every 500 years. For someone like him, many principles required only a single hint to fully comprehend. He did not need careful guidance or repeated explanations. The moment a thought crossed his mind, countless connections naturally formed. But ordinary geniuses were not like this. Even talents like Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong, Yun Ke, and xianxia, who could be considered 1 in 10,000, were still worlds apart from such a heaven-defying existence. What the imperial preceptor considered simple often required them to sit down, calm their minds, and think deeply for a long time. This difference was not effort, but pure innate talent. It was the difference between heaven and earth. Seeing their frustration, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor continued patiently. Using green dragon vital energy as an example, he asked them whether they truly believed green dragon vital energy was simply the wood attribute. He explained that a real green dragon was not limited to wood at all. A true green dragon could command wind, lightning, fire, and water. The name alone did not define its nature. Assuming green dragon vital energy was wood just because of the word green was a fundamental misunderstanding. These words struck everyone again. Even Qin Mu felt shaken. He recalled old Ma using green dragon vital energy. And indeed, there had been no trace of pure wood power. Only roaring wind and flashing lightning. Without the Imperial Preceptor's correction, Qin Mu realized he might have carried this misunderstanding forever. The Imperial Preceptor then explained that the 5 Elements divine treasure was not weak at all. In fact, its battle potential was terrifying. However, if cultivators failed to develop it properly, they would only feel a small weakness at first. This small flaw, though, would grow larger and larger as cultivation progressed. By the time one reached the Divine Bridge realm, the gap would become fatal. 2 cultivators who seemed similar in the early realms could end up worlds apart later, where one could be killed by the other in a single move. To illustrate this, he drew shapes in the air, showing how a slight deficiency early on would magnify over time. The image was simple, but the implication was chilling. Many cultivators focused only on breaking through realms, never considering the long-term consequences of weak foundations. When xianxia boldly asked how wide the Imperial Preceptor's own path was compared to other Divine Bridge experts, he calmly drew a single straight line. His meaning was clear. No matter how strong others were, their limits would always be lower than his. It was not arrogance, but confidence born from absolute talent and flawless cultivation. He then listed several cultivation manuals stored in the floor of Heavenly Record, written by the highest-ranking officials of the Empire, all Divine Bridge experts. These works specialized in strengthening the 5 Elements divine treasure. Everyone hurriedly memorized the names, fearing to forget even one word. Chen Wanyan felt conflicted. He had planned to break through to the 6 Directions realm as soon as possible. But after hearing this explanation, he decided to suppress his cultivation instead and reinforce his foundation before advancing further. Qin Mu, however, was stunned into silence. A realization struck him like lightning. In the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, there were countless techniques related to 5 Elements cultivation. He had always thought they were scattered, shallow, and lacking power. Now he suddenly understood. These techniques were not weak at all. They were fragments of a complete cultivation system, covering not only the 5 Elements realm, but possibly 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and even Divine Bridge. The Heavenly Devil cult had 360 halls precisely because each hall mastered part of this system. Qin Mu felt a clear path opening before him. The Overlord Body 3 elixir technique lacked certain refinements, but combined with the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, it might become complete. Excitement surged in Qin Mu's heart. As they walked, he began comprehending the true 5 Elements cultivation methods, linking earth, wood, water, fire, and metal into a single harmonious structure, and attempting to merge them into his own technique. Meanwhile, the others sought guidance from the Imperial Preceptor. Yu Qinghong asked about sword techniques. Yun Ke asked about Buddhist cultivation. Chen Wanyan discussed the fusion of blade and sword paths. Xianxia received especially detailed explanations. As the Imperial Preceptor paid close attention to her, even the wolf slave gathered his courage to ask about martial techniques. And the Imperial Preceptor taught him without discrimination, stating clearly that education belonged to everyone, regardless of race or origin. Eventually, everyone fell silent, immersed in comprehension. Even a few words from the Imperial Preceptor were enough to occupy their thoughts for a long time. Breaking the silence, Hu Ling'er asked whether the imperial preceptor had studied demon cultivation. When he replied that he had not, she enthusiastically offered to teach him. She spoke seriously about demon cultivation, the knowledge she had learned from the surging river dragon palace, and her understanding of spirit creation technique. The imperial preceptor listened quietly. After she finished, he asked a sharp question. Demon cultivators did not possess divine treasures, did they? Hu Ling'er confirmed it. Demons cultivated desperately to transform into human form. And once they succeeded, they became demon kings of terrifying power. The imperial preceptor found the spirit creation technique fascinating and explained it back to her in far greater depth. Hu Ling'er listened in awe, only realizing later that she had ended up being taught instead. The imperial preceptor merely smiled and said they were teaching each other. At that moment, strange lights appeared in the sky and descended toward Qin Mu. The imperial preceptor's gaze sharpened. The lights gathered and poured into Qin Mu's body from above his head, forming a stream of fiery radiance. The heat was so intense that it burned Hu Ling'er's fur when she reached out. Qin Mu's aura exploded. Flames surged from his body, surrounding him like rolling fire clouds. With two sharp sounds, bull horns burst from his head. White smoke mixed with flames poured from his nostrils. His bones cracked as his body grew larger and stronger. Muscles bulged, flame patterns spread across his skin, and a bull's eye opened on his forehead. Behind him, a thick bull tail appeared, heavy and powerful. Hu Ling'er stared in shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. Hu Ling'er was stunned for a moment before turning her head to tell imperial preceptor. My young master has revealed his true form. His true form. He's not a fox demon. He's a bull demon. This is not a demon but a kind of god transformation. To transform into the shape of gods. Eternal Peace imperial preceptor was used to this sight and explained to Hu Ling'er. In his eyes, Qin Mu had not revealed any true demon form at all. What had just occurred was a special type of transformation technique, something closer to a god transformation. It was likely the result of several techniques from the Heavenly Devil sect being merged together, combined with the 5 elements cultivation Qin Mu had just comprehended. The imperial preceptor observed carefully. This transformation did not resemble ordinary body divine arts. Normally, body divine arts only strengthened the flesh, allowing the cultivator to fight using a more powerful physical body. But Qin Mu's transformation was different. When his body changed, his vital energy changed alongside it. Even his aura was altered completely, as if he had temporarily become a different being. To the imperial preceptor, Qin Mu now resembled the manifestation of the Mars sovereign. His body, his vital energy, and even the divine arts he could use had all entered a new state. This was what puzzled the imperial preceptor the most. It was not merely imitation in form, but something closer to true resonance. The transformation continued. Fire clouds churned beneath Qin Mu's feet and slowly shaped themselves into 2 massive fire dragons. Their bodies twisted and coiled, lifting Qin Mu off the ground. As he stepped onto them, his shoes were torn apart, his feet transforming into blazing hooves engulfed in flame. At that moment, Qin Mu looked like the Mars sovereign descending into the mortal world, standing upon twin fire dragons. He raised his hand. The air instantly became unbearably dry. Countless fireballs, each about the size of a goose egg, appeared in the sky. They hovered silently, radiating scorching heat. Eternal Peace imperial preceptor watched with keen interest. Suddenly, each fireball burst open, releasing sword light formed entirely of fine flames. Every strand of sword light executed the sunset sword skill. Sword intent and fire-based spell power fused together perfectly. Each flaming sword carried astonishing might, far beyond ordinary techniques. The imperial preceptor sighed in admiration. This was an orthodox sword art of the Yuan Empire, combined with the principle of sword pellets and reinforced with spell power. With such strength, Qin Mu could already contend with true divine arts practitioners. If Qin Mu were to fight a 6 Directions realm expert head-on, he would not be killed instantly. And if he could fully unleash this god transformation body divine art, he could genuinely rival experts of that realm. The sword lights soon withdrew back into the fireballs. The fireballs collided and fused, forming a blazing red sun as large as a basin. Qin Mu opened his mouth and swallowed the red sun whole. Flames burst from his nostrils as white smoke mixed with fire poured out. Then, slowly, he ceased the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. The horns on his head shrank away. The fire dragons beneath his feet dispersed into sparks. His body returned to normal, though he winced slightly, reaching back to rub his buttocks. A sharp burning pain lingered there, as if he had been whipped several times. Qin Mu could not help but feel puzzled. Ever since growing up herding cattle, had he somehow developed a strange habit of whipping a cow's rear even when transformed into one himself? Ahead of them rose a towering mountain. A waterfall cascaded down its face like an inverted Milky Way, roaring endlessly. White water, black cliffs, lush green peaks, and the blazing sun above formed a scene like an ancient ink painting. Mist filled the air, dampening their clothes and soothing their spirits. The imperial preceptor led them deeper into the southern wilderness, far from any official road. Eventually, they reached the foot of the mountain where the waterfall pooled into a deep, clear basin. Beside the pool stood a magnificent buck, its antlers branching elegantly, white plum blossom spots scattered across its body. It was nearly as large as the dragon Qilin and radiated a majestic presence. The buck flicked its tail and grazed calmly, watching them approach. Nearby, an elderly man sat fishing. He wore a woven raincoat and straw hat, holding a fishing rod planted into the shore. Beside him stood a child, no longer a small boy but not yet a youth, tossing stones into the water right where the hook hung. He did so repeatedly, without pause. With the roaring waterfall and the constant splashing stones, catching fish here was impossible. Yu Qinghong shook his head, muttering that only a grandfather could tolerate such behavior from a child. Qin Mu, however, felt uneasy. This was no place for fishing. In such a remote wilderness, this elder and child were clearly not here by coincidence. Combined with the extraordinary buck, this elder's identity was certainly not simple. Monk Yun Ke stepped forward cheerfully and joked about the lack of fish. The elder lifted his head, revealing a deeply wrinkled but smiling face. He calmly replied that the fish had already arrived. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stepped forward and spoke sharply, questioning whether such a large fish could truly be caught. The elder responded with a metaphor. The world, he said, was once a clear pool. A great fish had come, stirring the waters and devouring the small fish instead of ascending through the dragon gate. Should such a fish be caught or not? The imperial preceptor replied just as sharply. He said the sects were not small fish, but leeches clinging to them. If the water appeared clear yet the fish were covered in leeches, then fishing was pointless. The leeches must be eliminated instead. Silence followed. Their words had turned sour. Neither side could convince the other. When ideals clashed, words were meaningless. Only destruction could decide the outcome. The elder stood up, removed his raincoat and straw hat, and sent the child away. The imperial preceptor instructed Qin Mu and the others to cross the mountain and wait. He asked whether the elder had passed down his abilities. The elder confirmed it. The imperial preceptor replied that he had no such need, though he admitted his regret for having destroyed too many sects in his youth. Qin Mu led everyone over the mountain. Below, mist concealed the battlefield. They could see only the child, now riding the massive buck. The boy introduced himself as Long Jiaonan of Little Jade Capital. The name stunned Qin Mu. Jade Capital referred to the dwelling of the Celestial Emperor. A sect daring to call itself Little Jade Capital was extraordinary indeed. Long Jiaonan spoke openly. His master had been invited to stop the imperial preceptor, whose actions were seen as devilish by many sects. To Long Jiaonan, the imperial scholars were merely the claws and teeth of the imperial court. Qin Mu felt conflicted. To him, the imperial preceptor seemed righteous. Yet to others, he walked the path of the devil. Righteousness and evil, he realized, often depended on perspective. When Hu Ling'er asked what Long Jiaonan would do if his master died, the boy answered confidently that no one could kill his master. At that moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor returned. He calmly told Long Jiaonan to retrieve his master's body. The elder had died, but his abilities had been passed down. Wang Muren froze, then ran toward the waterfall. His cries echoed through the mountains. The imperial preceptor spoke quietly about Little Jade Capital's mysterious ties to the heavens. Then he turned to Qin Mu, stating that Li City lay ahead and that he had been injured. Qin Mu nodded his head. Imperial preceptor's injury is difficult to treat. The medicine I prescribe would definitely be very complicated. Wang Muren carried the fishing elder's corpse and placed it on the back of the buck. He rode the buck and caught up with Qin Mu, Imperial Preceptor and the rest while shouting, "Imperial Preceptor, I'll take revenge for my master." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned around and looked at the young man with a calm but solemn expression. He did not mock him, nor did he discourage him with empty words. Instead, he spoke with rare seriousness. He told Wang Muren that his master's abilities were not weak at all, and that once Wang Muren fully mastered them, he must pass them on to his own disciples so that those techniques would not disappear from the world. To Imperial Preceptor, this was the true meaning of inheritance. Skills could die, but ideals and methods should not. Wang Muren let out a loud cry. Clouds gathered beneath the buck's hooves, and the massive beast carried him and his master's body into the sky, quickly vanishing into the distance. Qin Mu watched the scene silently. In his heart, he understood that this was not just a personal grudge. Someone had deliberately invited that elder from Little Jade Capital to test Imperial Preceptor. That elder's death was not an accident but a probe. This meant the struggle between Imperial Preceptor and the hidden forces behind the sects had already begun. Imperial Preceptor withdrew his gaze and explained to Qin Mu and the others that Little Jade Capital was an extremely ancient and mysterious sacred ground. It rarely involved itself in worldly affairs and had remained detached for countless years. Even he had only heard rumors about it before. Their methods were profound, but they were also outdated. By isolating themselves and refusing to observe the changes of the world, they had fallen behind. He warned Qin Mu and the others that cultivation alone was never enough. Without understanding the world, one could never become a true expert. Soon after, they arrived at Li City. The Eternal Peace Army had already swept through the area. The battle was over before Qin Mu arrived, and the city walls were largely intact. The rebel army had been annihilated outside the city before they could even mount a proper defense. Qin Mu understood clearly that when sect forces confronted a well-trained imperial army head-on, supported by formations and military strategy, defeat was inevitable. The people of Li City were mostly unharmed. Qin Mu immediately went to the herb shops, buying small amounts of herbs from each one. He visited more than 10 shops, carefully selecting different ingredients. By nightfall, they were staying at the city government office. The magistrate had already been arrested and sent to the capital. That night, the scent of medicine drifted through the compound. One basin of medicinal dregs was poured out, then another, and another. By the time dawn approached, 7 basins of dregs had been discarded. To ordinary people, it looked like nothing more than repeated treatments. But to those who understood medicine, it was a carefully constructed deception. The next day, in a herb shop in Li City, a middle-aged scholar in green robes examined the prescriptions Qin Mu had left behind. This man was spiritual master Dao Quan, a renowned medical expert. As he studied the herbs, his expression grew sharp. None of them revealed the true condition of Imperial Preceptor. Qin Mu had deliberately chosen misleading ingredients. Dao Quan realized he had underestimated this young divine physician. When his disciples brought him the discarded medicinal dregs, Dao Quan examined them one by one. Although Qin Mu had mixed in other waste to confuse observers, Dao Quan reorganized the remnants, reconstructed the formulas, and refined the medicines anew. After hours of work, 7 distinct medicines lay before him. Each one revealed a different aspect of Imperial Preceptor's injuries. With admiration, Dao Quan concluded that Imperial Preceptor's injuries were severe but treatable. With Qin Mu's methods, full recovery could be achieved in as little as 20 days, or at most half a year. This realization shocked him deeply. Qin Mu's medical skill was not just clever, it was profound. Dao Quan immediately set out for the southern borders, traveling 1,000 miles to Dali City. There, within the Grand Luoguang Temple, The leaders of multiple sects had gathered. These were powerful figures, all involved in opposing imperial preceptor. Dao Quan laid out the 7 medicines and explained their effects one by one. The first treated injuries to the soul. Several elders admitted they had damaged imperial preceptor's soul during an ambush. The second dispelled fire poison from an external wound. Another admitted responsibility. The third neutralized venom and wood poison. The fourth was a steaming treatment to heal damage to the 7 great divine treasures. The fifth was delivered through hollow needles to eliminate hidden dangers. The sixth strengthened the body, and the 7th nourished it afterward. Through this, Dao Quan confirmed that imperial preceptor had not yet recovered. But he also confirmed something more frightening. Given 1 month, Qin Mu could restore imperial preceptor to peak condition, leaving no lingering weaknesses. The atmosphere in the temple grew heavy. They realized their window of opportunity was closing. Wanderer Zhen of Little Jade Capital had already died, sacrificed as a test. The truth was now clear. Imperial preceptor was injured, but not crippled. Delay would only make him stronger. Tension rose among the gathered leaders. Old grudges, hidden identities, and mutual suspicion surfaced. Trust was thin, yet the decision could no longer be postponed. The bronze mask man looked around and asked. He ordered He Xiaopeng to come over and gave us 2 choices. It's time for us to make a decision. Which choice should we choose? The temple was in silence. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came aggressively. He brought 4 out of 8 Pillar of States, and there are still Grand General who crowns the army. Grand General of Cherishing Transformation, Duke Wei, and even a few first-ranking high officials among them. If we face them directly, we definitely can't win. The words echoed through Luoguang Temple, heavy and cold. No one spoke at first. The leaders of the great sects sat in tense stillness, all of them clearly aware of the truth behind those words. Facing the Eternal Peace Empire head-on, on an open battlefield, was a battle they were destined to lose. High official Ma Lianshan finally broke the silence. He spoke calmly, without arrogance or fear, only cold logic. He said that sects were strong in individual combat, in the martial world's duels and secret techniques. But the Eternal Peace Empire was an entirely different beast. It was built for war. It commanded armies, formations, supply lines, and discipline. Fighting the empire in its strongest domain was suicide. Instead, he argued, they should strike where the empire was weakest, not where it was strongest. Many nodded in agreement. This was not prideful talk, it was survival. At that moment, the Master of Passion Parting Palace spoke. Her voice was indifferent, yet her words carried deep weight. She reminded everyone of a tragedy from 200 years ago, when the battle techniques school had once been glorious, able to stand equally against sword control and spell schools. Back then, the practitioners of battle techniques were fearless and arrogant, challenging their enemies daily without hesitation. But where were they now? Her question hung in the air like a blade. Everyone knew the answer. The battle techniques school had been destroyed in a single debate, crushed by one man alone, the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Countless experts had marched to the capital, believing they could overwhelm him through sheer strength and numbers. Instead, they were humiliated, defeated, and broken. From that day onward, the battle techniques school declined, merging into others, losing its identity, its legacy, its pride. The palace master looked around the hall and asked coldly whether the current situation was truly any different. If they chose to fight according to the so-called rules of the martial world, would they not walk the same path toward ruin? When asked for her plan, she revealed it without hesitation. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor expected a righteous confrontation, bound by honor and tradition. They would deceive him, they would give him a location, lure him there, and then strike together. Abandoning all rules, they would kill him at any cost. She spoke bluntly. The empire's rise was inseparable from the imperial preceptor. He was more than a general or official, he was a living legend. If he rebelled, the emperor would fall. If he died, the empire would fracture. Without him, eternal peace would be far easier to destroy. Some hesitated, uneasy with trampling the ancient rules of the martial world. But no one openly opposed her. They all understood that once this line was crossed, history itself would be scarred. The martial world would never be the same again. Meanwhile, the Eternal Peace Army continued its unstoppable advance. Qin Mu traveled with them, repeatedly using his medical arts to treat the imperial preceptor. Moving from city to city, southern lands fell rapidly, without natural barriers like surging river. Defense was nearly impossible. Heaven Wave City had already been erased, its strategic value annihilated, yet Qin Mu could not claim credit. On the 5th day, they entered Exceed City, already conquered. At the city gates, an old beggar appeared, dressed in rags, holding a broken bowl. Monk Yun Ke reached for spare change, and Hu Ling'er offered a great abundance coin. The beggar thanked them warmly, then suddenly addressed the imperial preceptor directly, inviting him to Dashang City, where the heroes of the world awaited him. The imperial preceptor responded with icy disdain, saying that if they waited a few more days, his army would reach Dali instead, where all those so-called heroes could be slaughtered and thrown into the sea. The beggar laughed. In an instant, his aura exploded, gates of cultivation opened within his body, his spirit towering like a god above mortals. This was no ordinary beggar but sect master Chi Dao of the beggar sect. After declaring his challenge, he prepared to leave, but Qin Mu stopped him. Calmly, Qin Mu ordered Hu Ling'er to take back the coin, stating that the beggar was far richer than them. Enraged and humiliated, the beggar cursed them viciously before vanishing into the air. The imperial preceptor later warned them about the beggar sect, known for its cruelty and vile arts, far worse than the beggar hall of the heavenly devil cult. As they neared Dashang, Qin Mu attempted to withdraw, claiming his duty was complete. The imperial preceptor refused. Troubled, Qin Mu secretly went to a gambling den and issued a command. All 360 halls of the heavenly devil cult were to mobilize immediately through teleportation flags. Saintess xianxia confronted him at once. Gone was her former shyness, her voice was cold and sharp. She accused him of dragging the cult into danger, of risking its survival and reputation. Qin Mu answered plainly. He was the cult master. The cult already bore the name Heavenly Devil. Reputation was meaningless unless seized by force. She warned him that once the empire was done with the sects, the cult might be next. Qin Mu said he would take responsibility. Her smile returned, dangerous and light. She reminded him that previous cult masters had all met miserable ends. Qin Mu did not flinch. He ordered the command to be carried out. Outside, xianxia followed him, taunting him, questioning whether he should secure the great educational heavenly devil scriptures before dying. Qin Mu finally turned, his tone serious and absolute. He told her plainly that she was not his opponent. If she tried to kill him, she would only be killed in return. Using vital energy, he drew lines in the air, demonstrating the unbridgeable gap between them. No matter how wide her angle, her path would never surpass his. She challenged him anyway. Qin Mu walked on, his hands behind his back, his voice calm yet heavy with solitude. He declared that on the same realm, no one could defeat him. Not her, not even the imperial preceptor. Then he spoke the truth. He was the overlord body, the only one in the world. As the words settled, an overwhelming aura of invincibility surrounded him, carrying with it a profound loneliness. Xianxia froze, shaken not by fear, but by certainty. Overlord body? What kind of constitution is that? Is it stronger than the 4 great spirit bodies? She thought to herself. Could Patriarch choose him as the cult master and not me because he is the overlord body? Xianxia composed herself and raised her eyes to look at Qin Mu, who had walked far away. I will not be weaker than the so-called overlord body. The women of our sea family are natural-born cult master killers. If the saintess of the previous generation could kill the previous cult master, I can do it too. Her resolve burned fiercely, but Qin Mu did not turn back. By the next day, the group arrived at Flood County, which had already fallen 2 days earlier. As soon as the imperial preceptor appeared, a soldier hurried to report that many strange people had entered the city, all of them carrying flags. Eternal Peace imperial preceptor pondered briefly, glanced at Qin Mu, and calmly ordered the soldier to ignore them. There were only about a dozen at first. all wearing bamboo hats pulled low to hide their faces, weapons tightly wrapped in cloth, their bearings sinister and unfamiliar. On the third day, when they reached Clear River County, the number of such people had increased to dozens. By the fourth day in Hidden Fog City, their numbers had grown to several hundred. They came silently, one group after another, yet no one questioned Qin Mu, and he offered no explanation. The imperial preceptor also remained silent, as if everything was already within his expectations. On the fifth day, as they left the government manor in Hidden Fog City to continue toward Dashang, the truth of the situation revealed itself. One strange person stood up from the gates of the yamen and followed behind them. Then another emerged from an alley. Then another from the roadside. Before they even exited the city, several hundred figures in bamboo hats had gathered behind them. Men and women, young and old, all carrying concealed weapons and walking at a measured distance. Chen Wanyan and the others felt deeply uneasy. Yun Ke muttered that these must be the people carrying flags. Yet no flags could be seen. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor ignored them entirely, his expression unchanged. Outside the city gate stood a simple arbor. Beneath it sat two elders, one male and one female, selling tea. They politely invited the group to drink. Despite Yun Q's complaints, the Imperial Preceptor admitted he was thirsty and sat down. Qin Mu followed. The two elders joined them, 4 people sitting calmly around the table. When the others tried to approach, they discovered something terrifying. No matter how fast they ran, no matter how many steps they took, they could not draw any closer to the arbor. It looked only a short distance away, yet it felt separated by thousands of miles. Their hearts raced as they realized they were trapped in an unseen formation. After finishing the tea, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood and bowed politely. The two elders returned the bow, as if nothing strange had happened. The Imperial Preceptor said calmly that it was time to go to Dashang. When the group turned back one last time, they saw the hundreds of bamboo-hatted figures sitting quietly around the arbor, each holding a cup of tea, drinking in silence. It was an eerie, unforgettable sight. Si Yunxiang walked to Qin Mu's side and asked softly if it was done. Qin Mu nodded, saying only that she would know soon. When they reached the outskirts of Dashang City, they saw a sight that shook even seasoned warriors. Barracks stretched across the land, military camps as far as the eye could see. Duke Wei, the Grand General who crowns the army, and the Grand General of Cherishing Transformation were all present. They had not yet launched the assault. Dashang was the gathering point of rebellion, a strategic city where armies from across the land converged. Sect disciples poured in endlessly, waiting for the decisive battle. If war erupted here, it would become an event recorded for generations. Qin Mu saw golden-armored giants practicing siege tactics. These were battle technique experts who had strengthened their bodies to monstrous levels, swelling into towering figures clad in thick armor forged from mysterious metals. They pushed enormous cloud carts, wielded massive hammers, and deployed extending ladders capable of reaching city walls dozens of yards high. He saw soldiers practicing formations that turned the ground itself into a weapon. He saw flying cavalry riding enormous birds, diving from the sky as countless sword lights rained down, blanketing the earth. After each strike, the swords returned neatly to their cases. There were dozens of such flying units, moving with terrifying coordination. Against such forces, any ordinary sect would be utterly annihilated. Qin Mu realized how deeply Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's reforms had transformed the army into an unstoppable force. Even the Heavenly Devil cult would not survive such an assault. After brief exchanges with the generals, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor led Qin Mu and the others toward Dashang City itself. Flags of countless sects fluttered above the walls, along with banners of eradicated nations. The Imperial Preceptor shook his head coldly, stating that unless the old forces were completely wiped out, true greatness could never be achieved. Revolution required blood, and countless heads would fall. When asked if everything was ready, he answered simply that it was. The city gates opened wide. Rows of cultivators stood on either side of the gate, their vital energy forming towering apparitions of gods and devils behind them. Qin Mu's heart tightened. These were all strong practitioners of the celestial being realm, at least dozens at first glance. As they advanced deeper, the numbers grew horrifying. Every 10 steps, another celestial being realm expert stood in silence, stretching all the way to the city's heart. There were over 1,000. Yu Qinghong, who had spoken boldly before, fell silent, her confidence shattered. Qin Mu remained calm. He had seen similar numbers within the heavenly devil cult. The city itself had been completely flattened. Buildings, foundations, everything had been erased. Tens of thousands of soldiers stood in rigid formation, silent, watching. Walking under the gaze of so many powerful beings crushed the spirit. Even battle-hardened veterans trembled. At the city's center rose a massive platform, shaped from an entire mountain that had been moved here and carved into steps. When they reached the summit, they saw sect masters standing upon god and devil apparitions, some on palms, some seated between brows, none touching the ground. Their pressure was overwhelming. A beautiful woman stood upon the fingertips of a towering god apparition and looked down at the imperial preceptor, asking softly why he had come alone. Her vital energy had nearly solidified into a divine form, terrifyingly close to true godhood. Xianxia trembled, realizing how high this realm truly was. Qin Mu quietly asked her about a being he had seen before. One without limbs yet appearing whole and radiant when viewed through the third eye. Before she could answer, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor suddenly turned, his battle intent erupting uncontrollably, shaking the air itself. He demanded to know if Qin Mu had truly seen such a person. Qin Mu was shocked by the sudden outburst of his battle desire and said, "It's my elder." The corners of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes twitched. "Your elder again? You seem to have a lot of elders." Qin Mu blushed. "It's a little much. There's just 9 of them." 9 of such elders? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished. Were those 9 people like Mute? If so, the origin of this heavenly devil cult master was a little terrifying. For a brief moment, even the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was shaken. If Qin Mu's elders were truly beings of that level, then this young man standing beside him was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Then, instead of fear, a rare smile appeared on the Imperial Preceptor's face. He said that if there were truly 9 such people walking the same path, then his own journey would no longer be lonely. He had once believed that only he had reached this height, but now his heart finally felt calm. Qin Mu looked at him curiously. A strange thought crossed his mind. If he used Green Heaven's eyes on the Imperial Preceptor right now, would he be beaten to death on the spot? He was extremely curious whether the Imperial Preceptor was the same kind of existence as the village chief. Yet no matter how he observed, he could not see through this man. He could not see his cultivation clearly, nor could he grasp his true nature. Everything about the Imperial Preceptor felt contradictory, as if multiple truths overlapped within a single body. Qin Mu decided it was better not to provoke him. At that moment, a voice rang out, asking why the Imperial Preceptor was not responding. A man wearing a strange bronze mask walked forward. The mask had exaggerated features, long ears, a sharp nose, wide mouth, and, most shockingly, a hollow at the forehead. When Qin Mu looked carefully, he saw that there was indeed an eye there. A real eye opened between the brows. Qin Mu was startled. He had never seen such a technique before. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor ignored the masked man at first and instead addressed passion-parting Palace Master Chu Dai, calmly praising her secrets of hatred-parting heavenly sword, saying it was equivalent to a divine sword art passed down by a god. One by one, his gaze moved across the powerful figures present. He named Chariot Castle Lord Che Zhengli, Jade Castle Lord Yu Qingsheng, and Black Castle Lord Li Fei, accurately identifying their cultivation methods and origins. Even techniques that refined poison or transformed venom into power did not escape his understanding. When it came to spiritual master Dao Quan, the Imperial Preceptor's tone shifted. He recalled how Dao Quan had once saved countless lives during a great plague, distributing medicine freely and earning the respect of the entire southern region. He had even tried to recruit him into the Imperial College, only to be refused. Dao Quan replied solemnly that their paths were different. The imperial preceptor was too ruthless, determined to eliminate all sects, and thus Dao Quan had no choice but to stand against him. The imperial preceptor answered quietly that everything he had done was to save more people. Dao Quan admitted that the reforms had indeed improved the world, spreading medicine and knowledge everywhere, but he also pointed out that true divine physicians had disappeared. On this point, the imperial preceptor did not argue. He simply said that their paths were indeed different. High official Ma Lianshan then stepped forward. The imperial preceptor reminded him that he had personally recommended Ma Lianshan for office because of his upright character and talent. Yet Ma Lianshan had still chosen rebellion. Ma Lianshan replied that many good officials had rebelled, not just him, and urged the imperial preceptor to reflect on his own mistakes. The imperial preceptor responded coldly that rotten branches must be cut off. Even good people, if they stood in the way of reform, had to be removed. Then, one by one, he named the leaders of various sects, monasteries, and fallen nations, identifying their techniques and histories with terrifying accuracy. Finally, his gaze settled on the three ancient elders of the old generation. They revealed their identities calmly, speaking of lifespans nearing their end and grudges rooted in ancient history. Teacher Poor explained that he rebelled not for personal gain, but because the imperial preceptor's power had grown too overwhelming. If not stopped now, he would one day become emperor in truth. Standing tall on the mountain peak, the Eternal Peace imperial preceptor asked a single question that echoed across Dashang City. Who else was against him? The answer came instantly. Voices rang out one after another, declaring rebellion. Life and death realm experts, celestial being realm powerhouses, officials, sect masters, rulers, and generals. Their voices overlapped, surged, and shook the city, stirring blood and courage. The bronze-masked man shouted that with the entire world wanting him dead, how could the imperial preceptor continue living? The imperial preceptor replied coldly that a few 100,000 people did not represent the world. They were merely obstacles to be eradicated. Only when they were all dead would the world truly know peace. The bronze-masked man declared that the heavenly prison seal had already been laid over the mountain, sealing an area of 50 hectares. There was no need to worry about collateral damage. This time, no rules of the martial world would apply. Qin Mu sighed in relief and smiled faintly at xianxia. Monk Yun Ke, however, turned pale. He stammered that they were trapped inside the seal and would be the first to die from the shockwaves. He reminded everyone of Heaven Wave City, warning that this battle would be many times more terrifying. At that exact moment, massive flags suddenly rose from within Dashang City, stretching for dozens of miles. The expressions of the rebel leaders changed instantly. Before they could react, the flags rolled up, revealing 360 enormous banners. The bamboo-hatted figures revealed their true forms, and in an instant, tens of thousands of Eternal Peace soldiers appeared inside the city itself. The warning shout came too late. As the flags vanished, the sounds of slaughter erupted. Ferocious warriors emerged. Golden armored giants charged forward with cloud chariots. Flying ships ignited blazing fire, and massive birds took to the sky. Flying swords cut through the air. Blood blossomed like flowers, and heads fell in flashes of cold light. Infantry roared and transformed into elephant-headed giants, smashing into enemy ranks. Fire poured down from the skies, turning soldiers into burning figures. City walls collapsed under the assault, and flaming bodies fell like rain. Outside the city, the Grand General who crowns the army and the Grand General of Cherishing Transformation raised their weapons and pointed forward. At their command, the Eternal Peace Army surged ahead. Behind them, the uncountable Eternal Peace Army roared and rushed forth both on the ground and in the sky like a flood. The sight in the city was bone-chilling. Before the insect army of Three Wonders Castle could be deployed, they were drowned by a sea of fire and sword, disintegrating into ashes. The battlefield inside Dashang City instantly turned into a slaughter ground. The insect army, once feared for its overwhelming numbers and strange abilities, had no chance to organize. Flames poured down from above. Sword lights swept through the streets, and both the cultivators and the insects they controlled were burned together, leaving nothing but drifting ash. Their power meant nothing when faced with a perfectly executed surprise attack. Not far away, the female army of Passion Parting Palace met an equally brutal fate. They were famous for their discipline and strength, but before they could even form ranks, countless sharp swords descended from the sky like rain. The blades pierced straight through their bodies, leaving thousands of holes. Many of them died standing upright, their expressions frozen in shock. By the time their bodies finally collapsed, the swords had already flown back, neatly returning to the scabbards carried by the cavalry soldiers who had ridden past them without slowing down. Across the city, chaos spread. The rebel army and disciples from various sects were shattered before they could react. The infantry of the Eternal Peace Empire charged in perfect formation, smashing straight through the disorganized rebels and forcing each person to fight on their own. Individual cultivators were far stronger than ordinary soldiers, but strength meant little without coordination. Once surrounded by tightly linked formations, even experts had their heads severed in an instant. This was not a battle. It was a massacre. The ambush, carried out through the teleportation flags of the Heavenly Devil Cult, left the rebels no room to retreat. Faced with such overwhelming force, there was only one ending: complete annihilation. On the mountain overlooking the city, the bronze-masked man trembled as he whispered about the two choices they had been given. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had made it clear. One choice was to be crushed by the Imperial Army, driven all the way to the Southern Sea and exterminated to the last person. This was the iron rule of the Empire. The second choice was to follow the rules of the martial world and challenge him directly, fighting to the death. What they never expected was to face both choices at the same time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was not only wiping out the rebel army below, he was also preparing to personally destroy the sect masters on the mountain. The Palace Master of Passion Parting Palace shouted in fury, accusing the Heavenly Devil Cult of becoming lapdogs of the Imperial Court. But her anger betrayed her. The highest level of her sword art required a heart empty of emotion, like a clear mirror that reflected everything without disturbance. Seeing her disciples slaughtered shattered that state of mind. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor noticed instantly. Vital energy gathered at his fingertips and transformed into a blade of light. In a blink, it stretched across space and arrived at her throat. Not only her heart, but the hearts of all present were thrown into chaos. No one managed to intervene. A single thought rose in the minds of Qin Wanyan and the others: they were going to die. The mountain was sealed within the heavenly prison seal. Any clash between beings at this level would send shockwaves rebounding endlessly inside the barrier. If the fight began, everyone nearby would be crushed into nothing. Just before Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor made his move, a massive flag appeared before Qin Mu and his companions. It wrapped around them, and in an instant, both the flag and the group vanished. The next moment, they reappeared at the foot of the mountain. Before they could understand what had happened, hundreds of figures wearing bamboo hats surrounded the mountain in a wide circle. Their flags fluttered together, covering the entire peak. An ancient voice echoed with a single command: "Go." With a thunderous sound, the flags swept past. The mountain vanished. Along with it disappeared Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and all the cult master level existences fighting there. What remained was a flat stretch of pale land and the ruins of the City Lord's manor crushed into the ground. Before Qin Wanyan and the others could recover from the shock, the flags moved again. The world spun, and when their feet touched solid ground once more, they found themselves standing on a distant mountain peak. Violent winds roared around them, tearing at their clothes. The strange figures removed their bamboo hats and bowed deeply, performing a disciple's greeting. They spoke in unison, paying respects to the sacred cult master and saintess. The voice that answered them was calm and familiar. It was Qin Mu. Only then did the truth become clear. Qin Mu, the first abandoned person to enter the Imperial College and its first academician, was the true cult master of the Heavenly Devil Cult. Xianxia, standing beside him, was the Devil Saintess. Fear spread through Qin Wanyan and the others. Even the Sword Hall Master and Formation Hall Master of the Imperial College revealed themselves as members of the cult. Monk Yun Ke nearly lost his mind, begging not to be silenced. Qin Mu reassured them gently, joking that they could join the cult or be buried on the spot. The joke was so convincing that Yun Ke immediately pledged loyalty. After a moment of hesitation, Chen Wanyan and Yu Qinghong followed, joining the Heavenly Devil cult, now clearly aligned with the imperial court, was the only safe choice. Qin Mu then walked to the cliff and looked toward the distant battlefield. Even from miles away, the clash between Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and the remaining sect masters was terrifying. The heavenly prison seal was being torn apart, holes opening as storms of force escaped, creating gales strong enough to rip forests apart. The wind howling around them was born from that battle. Using his special vision, Qin Mu could barely track the remnants of movement. One by one, the traces vanished. Another cult master level existence had fallen. Yu Qinghong asked why the Heavenly Devil cult was not helping. Qin Mu answered calmly, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did not need assistance. What he needed was opportunity. The cult had already provided it. How our Heavenly Devil cult could help him was to create the chance for him to make his move. The instant the sect masters lost their spirit, it was the best moment for Imperial Preceptor to launch a sneak attack. No matter if it was the #1 cult of the Devil Path helping Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor or if it was Heavenly Devil cult using teleportation flags to transfer the Eternal Peace army. They were able to shake the hearts of all the cult master level existences by massacring all the sect's disciples, swaying their minds and throwing them into disorder. For beings who had reached the level of cult masters, a moment of mental disturbance was already fatal. Even though they quickly regained their composure, that brief instant was enough. Facing an existence like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, hesitation meant death. Most cult master level experts stood at the Divine Bridge realm. Yet even within that realm there were great differences. Some were strong, some were weak. As Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor himself had once said, no matter how wide another person's angle was, it could never match the length of his straight line. His cultivation surpassed everyone present, and his mastery of divine arts and sword techniques was on an entirely different level. Under the condition of a sneak attack, almost no one could withstand even a single move from him. This situation reminded Qin Mu of Heavenwave City. When Dushan Devil King had faced Grandpa Mute, Dushan Devil King had been slain in a single strike. And that strike, too, had been a sneak attack. Power alone was not everything. Timing decided life and death. Qin Mu judged that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could seize that instant of shaken spirit to kill at least 4 of the enemy experts. How many more he could injure depended purely on his own strength. Yet, despite the brilliance and terror of this battle between the strongest existences in the world, very few people could truly understand what was happening. Among the hundreds of observers, perhaps only the left and right guardians of the Heavenly Devil cult could clearly grasp every movement on the battlefield. Even among the 360 Hall Masters, most could not see clearly. Qin Mu focused his gaze on the distant battlefield once more. What he saw were only blurred afterimages and streaks of light formed by divine arts and sword skills clashing at extreme speed. From time to time, a trail of light would suddenly vanish, signifying the fall of another powerful expert. Now, only 8 figures remained. Aside from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, there were 7 others still fighting. Qin Mu's eyes flickered. These 7 had to be the strongest among the rebels. But who exactly were they? He could see god-like radiance flowing around them, yet their identities were hidden within the chaos. A thought crossed his mind. If he could not see clearly, then this battle was a missed opportunity. He wondered if he could awaken Cyan Heaven's eyes. He began circulating the energy within his body, directing more of it into his eyes, attempting to form the complex formation markings of Cyan Heaven's eyes. His eyes already contained 3 layers of pupils. The first was his own. The second belonged to Heaven's eyes. The third was Green Heaven's eyes. If he succeeded, Cyan Heaven's eyes would become the 4th layer, allowing him to see even deeper truths. But just as he poured his energy into his eyes, he felt something else flow in alongside it. In an instant, the entire battlefield became incomparably clear. Qin Mu froze. He shook his head and looked again. Everything was still perfectly clear. He had not even formed the formation markings. A chill ran down his spine. There were other eyes inside his eyes. He could now see every movement Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor made, every shift of posture, every layer within each divine art and sword technique, even their internal structure. This was not his own vision. It was someone else borrowing his eyes to observe the battle. Qin Mu immediately thought of Heavenwave City, when he had summoned Dushan Devil King. That terrifying existence had used Qin Mu's body as a medium. Power and consciousness had surged through him, blasting open the space between his brows. Later, when the Devil Withdraw command was activated, the connection had been severed, but that only meant the summoning was cut off. It did not mean everything had left. There was still a portion of Dushan Devil King's consciousness and power hidden inside his body. Realization struck Qin Mu like lightning. The one borrowing his eyes was Dushan Devil King. Cold fear spread through his chest. Where exactly was that consciousness hiding? Why had he felt no abnormality while cultivating all this time? What was Dushan Devil King planning? Yet Qin Mu quickly calmed himself. What remained inside him was only a fragment. No matter how powerful Dushan Devil King once was, this fragment could not be too strong. As long as Qin Mu found it, he could eliminate it. For now, he decided not to alert it and pretended to know nothing. Besides, this borrowed vision was an enormous benefit. Through these eyes, Qin Mu finally saw the battle in full clarity. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did not wield physical swords. His swords were formed entirely of refined energy, changing freely, gathering and dispersing at will. Flames of radiant light surrounded him like the aura of a god, reminding Qin Mu of the radiance he had once seen around the village chief. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor used sword skills, even the simplest sword form became unimaginably profound. Each movement contained layers upon layers of calculation, transformation, and subtle change. Qin Mu's heart shook. This was the Dao sword of the Dao sect. It relied on extremely complex calculations, similar to the principles within the canon of supreme mystery. Yin and Yang were not just concepts, but precise numerical transformations. Qin Mu realized that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's attainments in mathematics were terrifyingly deep. The ones fighting him were the strongest survivors. Teacher Por, Wanderer Li, and True Lord Tian stood like ancient gods, each surrounded by their own divine radiance. Teacher Por wielded a massive brush resembling a horsetail whisk, its long strands sweeping across the battlefield. Wanderer Li was a pure sword cultivator, his sword skills intricate yet outdated, formed from the 14 basic sword forms. They were beautiful, but they belonged to a previous era. True Lord Tian refined venomous insects, transforming them into terrifying dragon-like creatures. Centipede dragons, silkworm dragons, flood dragons filled the sky, yet one by one, they fell beneath Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword. Qin Mu judged that True Lord Tian would not last much longer. 4 others remained. Shi Dao of the Beggar sect used the 100-pore mystery technique, allowing his body to shift between solid and incorporeal, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Spiritual Master Dao Quan, whose strength was relatively weak, somehow remained alive, whether through luck or mercy. Venerable Ji Kong of Great Strength Monastery wielded powerful mudras, yet he was already covered in wounds, his strength nearly exhausted. And finally, the Bronze Masked Man. His divine arts were the most domineering and the most mysterious. 9 dragons surged with each attack, containing offense, defense, control of fire and water, and transformations of yin and yang. This was the 9 dragons monarch technique, a supreme art of the Imperial Ling family. Only those of true imperial bloodline could cultivate it. Qin Mu was shocked. This man was royalty, and not just any royal, but someone of extremely high status. At that moment, Qin Mu sensed something and looked westward. A colossal apparition of a sacred mountain rushed through the sky. Mount Meru. Countless monks formed its peaks, and atop the highest summit sat a golden Buddha radiating boundless light. Great Thunderclap Monastery had arrived. Old Buddha Rulai personally led his forces. As this happened, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor suddenly attacked without restraint and slew Venerable Ji Kong in a single strike. The Heavenly Devil Cult experts turned toward Mount Meru and shouted insults in unison. Monk Yun Ke joined them awkwardly. The monks of Great Thunderclap Monastery gazed down coldly and denounced them as evil creatures of the devil path. Qin Mu could not help but smile wryly. Qin Mu revealed a weird expression. The relation between our Heavenly Saint cult and Great Thunderclap Monastery seems to be a little strained. Right Guardian put her hands on her hips and sneered at the sky. Bald donkey, stay if you have the guts to. Old woman, I can scold you for 3 days and 3 nights straight in all kinds of ways. High above the battlefield, insults flew back and forth like sparks. But the monks of Great Thunderclap Monastery did not fall into pointless quarrels. On Mount Meru, Old Rulai calmly stopped the bodhisattvas and arhats, declaring that endless arguing would only waste time. After centuries of conflict, there was no need for impatience. What mattered now was seizing control of the situation. As the illusory Mount Meru descended toward the battlefield, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was still locked in combat with Teacher Poor and the other rebel masterminds. He was trying to finish them before Buddhism intervened. At that moment, Old Rulai's gentle voice echoed across the sky, asking whether Imperial Preceptor and the others might grant him a small favor. Imperial Preceptor halted his pursuit, dispersing his sword light, and politely invited Old Rulai to speak. Old Rulai requested that everyone pause and hold back. Both sides hesitated. True Lord Tien, gravely injured, accused Old Rulai of abandoning a chance to eliminate a great evil. Wanderer Li mocked Buddhism, suggesting it had become a servant of the empire. Teacher Poor demanded clarity. Old Rulai explained his true intention. He was not here to side with anyone, but to resolve karma. If the fighting continued, countless heroes would fall and many inheritances would vanish forever. Instead of mutual destruction, why not turn hostility into peace? Old Rulai then addressed Imperial Preceptor directly, reminding him of the past. Long ago, Imperial Preceptor had visited Great Thunderclap Monastery as a young seeker. Without sectarian prejudice, Old Rulai had guided him in cultivation. That bond of good karma now came due. Imperial Preceptor acknowledged this debt. He agreed to return the favor, yet voiced his concern. These rebels were the source of chaos. If spared, would they not rebel again and bring further bloodshed? Old Rulai answered calmly. He would take them into Buddhism, bind them to the mountain, and ensure they never again interfered with the mortal world. The battlefield fell silent. Old Rulai turned to Teacher Poor and the others, asking whether men and women who had once shaken an era would be willing to put down their arms and convert to Buddhism. True Lord Tien refused bitterly, warning that once the rebels were gone, Imperial Preceptor would surely turn on Buddhism next. Old Rulai did not argue. He explained that Buddhism did not rise or fall based on the favor of emperors or preceptors. As long as faith existed, Buddhism would endure. He offered a final choice: follow him and let go of grudges, or part ways forever. Behind Imperial Preceptor, 100 Eternal Peace generals descended from the sky, armor soaked in blood, their killing intent shaking the air. Duke Wei loudly accused Old Rulai of taking advantage, recruiting powerful rebels to strengthen Buddhism and releasing tigers back into the mountains. Imperial Preceptor stopped him. Allowing Old Rulai to mediate was better than mutual destruction. He trusted Old Rulai's promise, and moreover, he himself was injured. The bodhisattvas and arhats on Mount Meru turned solemn as Old Rulai signaled them to remain silent. Pressed by reality, Teacher Poor and the others exchanged glances. If they refused, Old Rulai would leave, and they would certainly die under Imperial Preceptor's sword. With heavy hearts, they agreed. One by one, they ascended Mount Meru, apologizing to their fallen comrade. Then Imperial Preceptor pointed at the bronze-masked man and spoke with quiet authority. This man must stay. A chill passed through the air. Old Rulai frowned, but said nothing. The decision was final. As Mount Meru departed with the converted rebels, the bronze-masked man laughed. Imperial Preceptor announced he would escort him to the capital to meet the emperor. The man understood instantly. Taken alive, his identity would shake the entire empire. Ministers would doubt the throne. The emperor's prestige would collapse. And suspicion would fall upon imperial preceptor himself. Without hesitation, the bronze-masked man shattered his own mask, destroying his face, and ended his life on the spot, his body remaining upright even in death. Imperial preceptor did not stop him. This was the best outcome. The dignity of the imperial family was preserved, and internal chaos was avoided. The corpse was sealed, the head buried, and the body prepared for transport. From afar, Qin Mu watched, his heart trembling. He understood the deeper game. Imperial preceptor did not seek the throne. He sought to use the empire as a tool to fulfill his grand ambition. To accomplish immortal deeds and walk the path of sainthood. As Mount Meru drifted away, old Rulai paid his respects to imperial preceptor, then departed westward with his followers. Passing over Qin Mu's position, insults were exchanged once more between Devil Path and Buddhist cultivators. Old Rulai halted and looked down, palms together, calling Qin Mu senior brother. The guardians were shocked. Qin Mu returned the greeting calmly. Their eyes met briefly before Mount Meru vanished into the distance. Right Guardian Shui Bae complained angrily, saying Qin Mu had exposed himself and would now attract trouble. Qin Mu only smiled, standing tall in his role. As the sacred cult master, I can't not return the greeting after he greeted me as an equal. Qin Mu smiled. We can't keep hiding the fact that I'm the sacred cult master. Besides, I can't throw the face of all of you nor the face of the sacred cult. Everyone said in unison, we rather not have this face. On Mount Meru's apparition, a bodhisattva put his palms together. My Buddha, eternal peace imperial preceptor said he was injured. Why didn't we take the chance? Old Rulai answered with a gentle smile, asking a question instead of giving an explanation. Was the injury real, or was it fake? The bodhisattva was left speechless. Unable to tell, old Rulai calmly explained that those who believed too easily had already lost. Some had even paid with their lives. He turned his gaze toward Teacher Poor and the others, pointing out that their crushing defeat came precisely because they believed Imperial Preceptor was truly injured. Teacher Poor, Wanderer Li, True Lord Tian, and the others fell silent, their faces ashen. Spiritual Master Dao Quan was filled with regret. From Qin Mu's discarded medicinal residues, he had deduced that Imperial Preceptor had suffered severe injuries. Every sign supported that conclusion, so everyone trusted it and chose the second path, the martial confrontation. Yet that choice itself had been part of the trap. In truth, no one could be blamed entirely. The ambush by three peak existences of the era should have gravely wounded anyone. Their reputations and strength stood at the pinnacle of the world. Even a genius said to appear only once in 500 years could not logically emerge unscathed. Everything afterward reinforced the illusion. Imperial Preceptor only lectured at Imperial College for 2 days, masking the scent of blood with perfume. The Dragon Rider sect's Dragon King visited his manor and left safely. His injuries seemed to relapse during his clash with Wanderer Zhen, forcing Qin Mu to nurse him day and night. All signs pointed to severe wounds requiring at least a month to recover. Yet old Rulai revealed the cruel truth. From the very moment of that ambush, everyone had already stepped into Imperial Preceptor's scheme. There had never been two choices, only one. A genius who appeared once in 500 years was not merely gifted in talent and comprehension. Old Rulai said, such a person was equally unmatched in strategy and manipulation. If he could not become a saint, then he would inevitably become a lawless devil, and either path would shake the world. Then old Rulai uttered a single word, quiet yet heavy with meaning. Fool. The monks and former rebels were stunned. Beggar sect Master Chi Dao muttered that Imperial Preceptor had allied himself with Heavenly Devil cult and was destined to walk the devil path. He lamented that no one knew who the new cult master was. Old Rulai smiled and said they did know. It was the young man who had returned his greeting earlier. Old Rulai admitted that he had once wished to guide that young man into Great Thunderclap Monastery. But fate had slipped away by a single step. Realization struck everyone at once. That young man was Qin Mu. Old Rulai sighed, lamenting the lost destiny. Had he been just one step faster, things might have turned out differently. Far from Mount Meru, Duke Wei stared at the coffin holding the headless corpse and questioned Imperial Preceptor again. He accused Great Thunderclap Monastery of exploiting the situation to save the rebel leaders and strengthen itself. Imperial Preceptor replied calmly that those old monsters had only 10 to 20 years left to live and were no longer a real threat. As for old Rulai's actions, they were exactly as expected. He himself had been injured and lacked the strength to stop them. Duke Wei narrowed his eyes and asked again whether the injury was real or fake. Imperial Preceptor insisted it was real, snapping that no one could fight multiple cult master-level existences, including godlike figures, without suffering wounds. Duke Wei scoffed, saying that everyone who believed those words was already lying motionless in coffins. Their conversation turned darker. Duke Wei hinted at the internal conflict within the Ling family and suggested that perhaps Imperial Preceptor should simply become emperor. The murderous intent in Imperial Preceptor's eyes forced Duke Wei to retreat his words in fear. He explained that it was not just his idea. Many old generals who followed Imperial Preceptor thought the same. His achievements had already reached a point where the emperor could no longer reward him properly. Quelling a rebellion of this scale left only one possible reward: the throne itself. Imperial Preceptor refused. He said the emperor was his close friend and understood him. What he sought was not power, but the fulfillment of his lifelong aspiration. Duke Wei pointed out the emperor's dilemma. If Imperial Preceptor was not rewarded, the world would be disappointed. If he was rewarded, there was nothing suitable to give. Gold and women meant nothing to a man like him. Worse still, future rulers might not understand him as the current emperor did. The real fear of the Empress Dowager was not Imperial Preceptor himself, but the massive power gathered under his command. Imperial Preceptor cut the conversation short and ordered Duke Wei to focus on cleaning up the remnants of the rebellion. He himself would seek out the little divine physician for treatment. Below the mountain, Qin Mu met Imperial Preceptor. Once again, Imperial Preceptor stated that he was injured. The dragon Qilin nearly laughed aloud but immediately shut up under his gaze. Qin Mu asked directly whether it was real or fake. Imperial Preceptor insisted it was real. Growing visibly irritated, Qin Mu accepted the answer and prepared to treat him. Their journey led them through ruined cities until they reached Hidden Fog City, a place perpetually shrouded in mist. There, Qin Mu examined Imperial Preceptor carefully and discovered more than 100 injuries. Most were internal, some caused by venomous insects, others invading the divine treasures themselves. His dense cultivation had barely suppressed the damage. The injuries within the spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge treasures were especially difficult to handle. Even the soul bore wounds. For Qin Mu, this was both an immense challenge and a rare opportunity to deepen his understanding of the mysteries of the divine treasures. Lacking rare spirit herbs, Qin Mu improvised. He ordered a massive pot filled with water and medicinal ingredients, turning it into a giant steamer. Imperial Preceptor lay inside naked, pierced by hundreds of silver needles that guided medicinal energy deep into his divine treasures. As steam rose, Imperial Preceptor suddenly asked whether he should accept rewards like gold and women if the Emperor offered them. Qin Mu calmly replied that since there was nothing else the Emperor could give, he should accept them. Their conversation drifted to family, wealth, and solitude, until Qin Mu ordered him to stop talking and endure the treatment in silence. Half a month passed as they traveled toward the capital, treating what they could along the way. Though not fully healed, Imperial Preceptor's condition improved greatly. Upon reaching the capital, they were met with white banners and lanterns. The Empire was in mourning. They soon learned that North Garrison King Ling Yinfeng had died. Known as the 8th Imperial Uncle, he was the younger brother of the former emperor, a legendary general loved by the people. He had conquered countless lands, saved the former emperor's life many times, and endured severe wounds throughout his life. The successful ascension of Emperor Yangfeng to the throne was due to his support. He played a huge part in paving out the empire of the Ling family. When Qin Mu heard the news, He frowned slightly and took a look at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. The man revealed a mournful expression and said, "I'll be offering my condolences to North Garrison King's manor." Qin Mu lowered his voice and asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. Why would North Garrison King rebel? Imperial Preceptor answered calmly that it was not rebellion against the Emperor, but against him. Everything was done for the Ling family's empire. His power had grown too great. So great that it made even close kin uneasy. North Garrison King feared that one day Imperial Preceptor would overturn the Ling family's rule. With a faint sigh, Imperial Preceptor admitted that Qin Mu was right. It was indeed time for him to start a family. Even if heaven's law resided in one's heart, desire could not be completely absent. Qin Mu could not hide the strange look on his face. The idea of someone like Imperial Preceptor starting a family felt unreal. Yet it was clearly no joke. Imperial Preceptor said he would first return to his manor to change into somber robes. Regardless of disagreements, North Garrison King had contributed immensely to the empire and deserved respect. Paying condolences was a matter of principle. He then bade farewell to Qin Mu, explaining that now they had returned to the capital. Qin Mu no longer needed to trouble himself with treating his injuries. Qin Mu nodded. Imperial Preceptor's wounds from the ambush were already healed. With a divine physician now at his side, Qin Mu's task was complete. When Imperial Preceptor returned to his manor, he did not enter through the main gate. Instead, he leapt over the walls directly. Alert and cautious, the seals around the manor were intact, yet the silence was unsettling. He called out for old Fu and Fu Yuanqing, but no one answered. Entering the hall, he saw his servants and bodyguards bound together and piled on the floor. His gaze then landed on Fu Yuanqing. The little poison king was completely stripped, tied upside down to the ceiling. His tongue was stretched out, bound with a golden rope, and weighed down by a massive iron block. Imperial Preceptor's frown deepened. With a flicker of sword light, he cut Fu Yuanqing free, only to discover that all of his cultivation and divine treasures had been sealed. After undoing the seals on everyone, Imperial Preceptor asked what had happened. Fu Yuanqing could only shake his head in humiliation. He had seen nothing at all. Even when his tongue was pulled out, he had not seen the attacker. Some servants whispered fearfully, wondering if the manor was haunted. Imperial Preceptor dismissed the idea. It was not a ghost. The intruder was simply too fast to be seen. He immediately understood who it was. That person had come to retrieve his leg while Imperial Preceptor was away. He added that the treasury had likely been emptied as well. They rushed to the treasury and found the seal untouched. Fu Yuanqing relaxed and laughed, thinking the thief had failed. Imperial Preceptor shook his head. A phantom with no fixed form did not need to break seals. Such a person could pass through them without leaving a trace. He opened the door. The treasury was spotless, completely emptied. Even the painting of Sword God, drawn by the Crown Prince of Heavenly Painting Country, was gone. In its place were crude, infuriating scribbles. The message cheerfully announced that the leg had been taken back, the treasures borrowed, and the servants treated kindly. It added, with shameless pride, that the intruder had slept on Imperial Preceptor's bed, relieved himself there, and even brewed a pot of tea in the study room. With that, all grudges were declared settled. Imperial Preceptor's face darkened. He rushed to the bedroom, lifted the blanket, and immediately waved his hand in disgust. The bedding was thrown out, followed by the bed itself. In the study room, the stench was no better. The so-called tea was clearly something far more humiliating. Imperial Preceptor swept everything out the window, grinding his teeth in anger. Then came another blow. Old Fu hesitated before admitting that there was barely any money left. Imperial Preceptor was stunned. His salary had already been spent, half taken during the journey. The rest used on obligatory gifts for nobles, ministers, and even the Empress Dowager, who had still found the gift lacking. Imperial Preceptor felt a headache coming on. With North Garrison King's death, more gifts were unavoidable, yet the manor had nothing left to pawn. He lived simply, despising excess, and the few valuable items he owned had all been stolen. Borrowing his salary in advance would cost him face. Borrowing from others was difficult as well. Finally, he thought of Qin Mu. Qin Mu was generous, wealthy, and not part of the imperial court. Borrowing from him would not be humiliating. With that decision made, imperial preceptor set off. When Qin Mu returned to Scholar's residence, he immediately smelled strong medicinal fragrances. Entering his courtyard, he found piles of herbs, precious furnaces, and cauldrons. Inside them were a leg and an arm. Qin Mu ordered Hu Ling'er and the dragon Qilin to guard the courtyard and entered the room alone. Inside, he saw Cripple and Old Ma. Cripple had cleaned himself up, hair glossy, beard neatly tied with golden thread, clothes chosen with care. Old Ma looked weary from travel, one sleeve empty, yet his expression softened when he saw Qin Mu. Qin Mu's eyes reddened. He asked if they had come to see him. Old Ma bluntly said no. Cripple teased him cruelly, claiming they had only come for practical reasons. Qin Mu snapped back, insisting they were lying. Cripple laughed and said he was only here to reattach his leg. When Qin Mu refused, Cripple flew into a rage. Old Ma calmly intervened, reminding Cripple that if not for Qin Mu, he would not even have a chance to recover his leg. Finally, Cripple admitted the truth. He had gone to Imperial Preceptor's manor, stayed there for a while, taken his leg back, and even helped himself to some treasures. He spoke proudly, boasting that Imperial Preceptor could only watch helplessly. Qin Mu smiled warmly and asked a simple question. If Imperial Preceptor had been with him the whole time, then who exactly had Cripple seen at the manor? Cripple stared at him, and Qin Mu didn't give in, staring right back. The smiles on their faces were similarly warm and gave others a feeling that they could be trusted. Even if one was stabbed by them, they would still think they deserved to be trusted. Qin Mu and Cripple continued staring at each other. Old Ma was warm-hearted despite looking cold. We're all adults, so stop throwing a tantrum. We're here to see how you're getting by and if our limbs are still usable. Old Ma's calm voice broke the strange tension in the room. Despite his stern expression, his tone carried genuine concern. He explained that he had traveled all the way from Great Thunderclap Monastery, a journey of thousands of miles, specifically to check on Qin Mu. As for Cripple, he bluntly claimed he had no such intention. His severed leg had been kept at Imperial Preceptor's manor, and since Qin Mu happened to be nearby, he simply came along for convenience. Qin Mu felt a subtle warmth in his chest, but before he could respond, Old Ma gently revealed fragments of Qin Mu's forgotten childhood. When Qin Mu was still an infant, Granny had never raised a child before and was overwhelmed. Qin Mu cried constantly, wet the bed every night, cried when hungry, cried when full, and even cried when he could not fall asleep. The noise drove everyone in the village nearly mad. Several times, Granny attempted to send him away to be raised by neighboring villagers, hoping for some peace. Each time, however, Qin Mu mysteriously returned to Granny's bed the very next morning. Old Ma revealed the truth. It had been Cripple, silently stealing the child back in the night. Despite claiming to hate children more than anything, Cripple scoffed and denied it loudly, insisting he despised children and would have kicked Qin Mu every day if he had both legs. Qin Mu was stunned. He could hardly believe that Granny had ever wanted to send him away, considering how deeply she doted on him later. Old Ma added that even village chief and apothecary had agreed at the time that sending Qin Mu away might bring peace back to the village. Qin Mu's heart sank further when he learned that Grandpa Mute had once considered the same idea and had even planned to offer a milking cow to sweeten the deal. Fortunately, Qin Mu soon stopped wetting the bed, and the plan was abandoned. Trying to find some comfort, Qin Mu mentioned blind and deaf, believing they had always cherished him. Old Ma admitted that blind indeed doted on him, but after Qin Mu once relieved himself all over blind's face while being lifted into the air, blind no longer objected when Granny discussed sending him away. Cripple added with cruel amusement that deaf had been the most annoyed of all. Qin Mu constantly climbed onto deaf's desk, spilled ink everywhere, and even urinated directly into his ink stone. By now, Qin Mu was suffering one psychological blow after another. His voice turned hoarse as he begged them to stop talking about his childhood embarrassments. He reminded them that he was now the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult and asked to examine their injured limbs instead. Though Cripple and Old Ma laughed heartily, Qin Mu walked into the courtyard with a dark expression and brought in the medicinal cauldron and furnace. He carefully examined Cripple's leg and Old Ma's severed arm, slicing small openings to draw blood and analyze their condition. After careful inspection, Qin Mu explained that Old Ma's arm, though it had lost about half of its life force, had been preserved extremely well. Someone had used Buddhist incantations to maintain the vitality of the blood, allowing the arm to remain viable. With proper nourishment from spirit pills and miracle medicine, the arm could be reattached and would recover fully after several years of training. Old Ma confirmed that his arm had been kept in the Thousand Buddha Pagoda, where monks chanted incantations day and night to preserve the bodies of past enlightened beings. Qin Mu was shocked to learn that such a place truly existed. When Qin Mu turned to Cripple's leg, however, his expression became serious. He declared that the leg was no longer alive. The blood had spoiled, the flesh had died, and it could not be reattached. Cripple exploded in disbelief, shouting that his divine legs had been cultivated to a godlike realm and could not possibly perish after only a few decades. Qin Mu calmly explained, with an almost innocent smile, that he had tasted the blood and detected the flavors of spices and smoke. In all likelihood, Imperial Preceptor had smoked the leg into dried meat. Cripple burst into furious laughter, then suddenly froze in panic as he remembered just how poor Imperial Preceptor truly was. Old Ma intervened, telling Qin Mu not to frighten Cripple further. Qin Mu then reassured them both. Although Cripple's leg and Old Ma's arm lacked the vitality that came from being attached to a living body, their life force was still present. With proper medicinal treatment, the limbs could be revived over 10 to 15 days and successfully reattached. Relieved, Cripple mentioned that he had taken many spirit herbs from the palace treasury and offered to steal more if needed. Qin Mu declined, stating that the Imperial College warehouse contained everything necessary. Just then, Hu Ling'er announced that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had arrived. Qin Mu was startled, suspecting that Cripple's theft had been discovered. He quickly closed the main room and went outside. The powerful Imperial Preceptor stood awkwardly at the gate end. After a long pause, asked Qin Mu if he could borrow some money. Qin Mu was bewildered. The mighty Imperial Preceptor explained honestly that while he was away at war, a thief had emptied his manor completely. Now penniless, he still needed funds to attend North Garrison King's funeral rites. Qin Mu felt conflicted, suspecting Cripple's involvement, yet smiled and asked how much was needed. Imperial Preceptor requested 1 month of his salary. Qin Mu immediately instructed Hu Ling'er to bring 1,000 great abundance coins. While handing over the money, Qin Mu gently remarked that being poor was not a requirement for nobility. Imperial Preceptor replied that excessive desires hinder cultivation and that he would repay the loan once imperial rewards arrived. Before leaving, Imperial Preceptor subtly sensed the powerful presences hidden within Qin Mu's room but respected Qin Mu's request not to disturb his injured elders. After Imperial Preceptor departed, Qin Mu confronted Cripple, who casually admitted to taking everything except a priceless painting by Def depicting the sword god's back. Cripple handed the painting to Qin Mu, warning him never to look at it, as it could blind or kill him due to the overwhelming power of the figure depicted. Old Ma reflected that Def had once seen Village Chief in his youth and held him in deep reverence. With Mu gone, Def would surely leave the village as well. Qin Mu felt deeply moved, realizing that one by one, the elders of disabled elderly village had left their home for his sake. As Qin Mu sorted through the stolen spirit herbs, he noted that although palace herbs were rare, they were still inferior to those grown by Grandpa Apothecary. Still, they were sufficient. With them, he already had the prescription to nourish Old Ma's arm and Cripple's divine leg. He just needed to pick some supplementary herbs from the warehouse in Imperial College. Qin Mu tidied up the herbs and matched them up. He nourished Old Ma's arm and Cripple's leg with medicine before buying some venomous insect powder of the south from the warehouse of the Imperial College. After preparing the medicine, Qin Mu took out the venomous insect powder he had acquired. This powder was refined from extremely tiny creatures known as vermilion beauty venomous insects. Each individual insect was so small that it could not be seen with ordinary sight. Only those with spiritual perception could detect them. Once dried into powder, the insects appeared completely dead, but the moment they came into contact with fresh blood, they would revive. Qin Mu requested a small amount of fresh blood from Old Ma and Cripple and slowly dissolved the powder into it. Almost immediately, the blood seemed to come alive. Tens of thousands of minuscule insects stirred within the goblets, writhing and swimming as if the blood itself had gained consciousness. Old Ma and Cripple, whose eyesight far surpassed that of ordinary people, could clearly see the dense mass of insects. The sight was deeply unsettling. Cripple forced a smile and asked whether Qin Mu truly planned to use such terrifying insects to heal their limbs. In the disabled elderly village, Apothecary had always been the most frightening person when it came to strange medicines and poisonous creatures. Even Cripple, who dared to steal from anyone, had never once touched Apothecary's room. Now, seeing these insects, Cripple felt an instinctive chill. Qin Mu calmly reassured him. He explained that vermilion beauty venomous insects came from the venomous insect techniques of the southern border sects and posed no direct harm when properly controlled. He carefully injected the blood containing the insects into the blood vessels of Old Ma's arm and Cripple's leg, planting the insects within the severed limbs. He then explained the origin of their name. In the southern regions, some women used these insects to preserve their beauty and youth. Even after death, their bodies would still appear lifelike. Hearing this, Cripple could not help but shudder. The idea of looking alive after death filled him with unease. Qin Mu placed the arm and leg into a medicinal cauldron filled with prepared decoction. He explained that these insects fed on dead blood, decayed flesh, damaged muscle membranes, broken bone fragments, and lifeless marrow. By consuming everything that no longer belonged, they allowed the body to remain youthful and intact. That was why those who raised such insects could maintain a youthful appearance for their entire lives. He added, somewhat innocently, that Apothecary once mentioned having female friends who used these insects and still looked like young girls decades later. Qin Mu paused, visibly puzzled, and wondered aloud what Apothecary meant by very tight. Cripple immediately told him to stop thinking about such things, reminding him that he was still too young. Qin Mu then revealed the true drawback of the vermilion beauty venomous insects. When they grew hungry, they would begin devouring healthy flesh and blood. Those who harbored them needed to constantly supply fresh blood, and as the insects multiplied, the required amount would increase. In the southern lands, it was common for beautiful women to seduce strong men, drain their essence and blood overnight, and leave behind only empty skin, all to nourish their insects. As Cripple listened, his expression grew darker by the moment. Qin Mu then took out a seed from among the spirit herbs taken from the palace. Lifting a floor tile, he revealed jade-like soil beneath and planted the seed. He watered it with spiritual water taken from Jade Dragon Palace. Almost instantly, the soil bulged, and a tender shoot burst forth, growing rapidly before their eyes. As Qin Mu walked around the sapling, he activated the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and followed it with the Earth Eon creation technique. Each mudra he formed resonated with the tree. When his fingers brushed against the leaves, they were deflected, producing clear, melodic sounds like notes from a guqin. The rhythm filled the room as the sapling grew into a small tree, its branches lush and vibrant. White pear blossoms soon bloomed, filling the room with fragrance. Qin Mu continued his technique, explaining that although vermilion beauty venomous insects were infamous, the imperial medical authorities had modified them so they could no longer reproduce. He spoke casually of how Imperial Physician Yu had even created an insect elimination pill, used to kill the insects once they threatened the body. The blossoms withered, and small green pears formed, growing steadily under Qin Mu's techniques until they turned golden and fragrant. He explained that although the insect elimination pill was made from ordinary herbs, it was sold at an outrageous price, making Imperial Physician Yu immensely wealthy. Even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's monthly salary was not enough to buy a single pill. Cripple's eyes sparkled at the word, wealth. But his attention was quickly stolen when Qin Mu plucked the ripe yellow pears and tossed them over. Old Ma and Cripple bit into them, immediately praising their sweetness. Qin Mu shyly explained that the technique he used was the Earth Eon creation technique taught by Granny. Cripple recalled seeing Granny C use the same technique in a terrifying manner, refining the sun itself and burning countless people to death. Qin Mu worried that he might have practiced it incorrectly, but Old Ma reassured him. The sun nourished all life, and using the technique to foster growth was the proper path. Qin Mu sliced the pears and added them to the medicinal decoction, explaining that the fruit served to stimulate the effects of other herbs. He described how he would first use the insects to cleanse the dead matter, then force them out with medicine, leaving no trace behind. This method far surpassed that of Imperial Physician Yu. Afterward, Qin Mu moved the pear tree into the courtyard and shared the fruit with Hu Ling'er and the dragon Qilin. The dragon Qilin ate enthusiastically, prompting Qin Mu to worry that it was growing too fat to fly properly. Cripple soon grew restless and insisted on going out for a walk. Old Ma accompanied him, ensuring he would not cause trouble. Qin Mu felt no concern for their safety. Several days later, the Imperial scholars returned from the front lines. Reports arrived of fierce battles against sects summoning devils, spirits, and corpses. Many elite scholars had perished. Although the rebellion was eventually quelled, the losses were severe. When the scholars returned to Imperial College, Hu Ling'er reviewed the casualty list, secretly hoping to see Qin Mu's name among the dead. When he failed, his frustration deepened. Soon after, he encountered a eunuch carrying an imperial decree, announcing that Qin Mu had earned merit and would be promoted for saving the scholars. Hu Ling'er's expression froze, and he said angrily, "This is what he should do. Why is there a need for a reward?" His Majesty said that some people can't even do what they should do properly. So he decided to use this as a warning to others. As a warning? Am I the one being warned? The corners of Hu Ling'er's eyes twitched as he felt anxious in his heart. He took out a few great abundance coins and stuffed them into the eunuch's hand before bracing himself on his way to the palace. Hu Ling'er's steps toward the palace were heavy, his mind tangled with unease. Before he had even gone far, another imperial decree eunuch hurried toward him with a bright smile, loudly offering congratulations. Distracted and uneasy, Hu Ling'er asked what joy there was to speak of. The eunuch happily explained that an imperial academician from the Imperial College had gained merit for quelling the rebellion, and His Majesty had sent a decree to promote him. Hu Ling'er froze. Promotion again? He exclaimed that another eunuch had just delivered a promotion decree moments earlier. The eunuch clarified that the first promotion was a correction of duty, elevating the academician to upper 6th rank. This second decree, however, was for real merit earned at the southern border, raising him again to lower 5th rank. With stiff fingers, Hu Ling'er discreetly slipped coins into the eunuch's hand, forcing polite words through clenched teeth. He had barely continued walking when a third eunuch appeared, smiling even more broadly. Once again, congratulations were offered. Once again, the reason was the same man. This time, the eunuch announced that Imperial Academician Qin Mu had treated the injuries of the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor himself. For this, he was promoted yet again, straight to upper 5th rank Palace Grandee, enjoying Dai Yu comparable to the Directorates. 3 promotions in a single day, a rare joy for the Imperial College. Hu Ling'er nodded woodenly, paid the customary bribe, and watched the eunuch leave. The moment he was alone, his face darkened completely. Qin Mu was rising at a terrifying speed, while Hu Ling'er himself had just been demoted. If this continued, it would not be long before their ranks were equal. Worse, Hu Ling'er had personally paid for each of Qin Mu's promotions. If he keeps rising, Hu Ling'er muttered bitterly, I will be the one forced to call him Lord. Suppressing his turmoil, he entered the palace to submit the casualty list. Emperor Yangfeng was reviewing memorials. Upon reading the list, the emperor's expression darkened with grief and rage. These dead scholars were future pillars of the empire, slaughtered because confidential information had leaked. He declared he wanted blood. Hu Ling'er stood drenched in cold sweat. Afraid to utter a single word, Emperor Yangfeng paced, then slammed the table, demanding to know how the rebels had known exactly when and where to ambush the scholars. Only a handful of people had known the details. Forced to speak, Hu Ling'er analyzed the situation carefully. The rebels had acted with precise timing, executing their soul-guiding ritual the moment the scholars arrived. This meant the information had come from the highest level. It could not have been the scholars or directorates. The traitor had to be among the top officials present at the secret discussion. That meant either Hu Ling'er himself, or someone of equal rank. The emperor sneered, listing the suspects: first-ranking officials, the crown prince's teachers, and the highest ministers of state. He demanded Hu Ling'er name the traitor. Sweat streamed down Hu Ling'er's face. He dared not speak. Emperor Yangfeng coldly accused him of disloyalty. Desperate, Hu Ling'er claimed ignorance, saying he had been frozen in the Great Ruins for over 200 years and did not truly know the court. The emperor ordered him to speak freely and promised pardon. Hu Ling'er tried to deflect with self-deprecation, even mentioning how Qin Mu had tricked him out of his treasured sword. This only enraged the emperor further. Finally, forced into a corner, Hu Ling'er named the crown prince's teachers as suspicious. Imperial pressure burst forth, crushing him to the ground. Then, abruptly, the emperor withdrew his force and dismissed him, only to call him back moments later. This time, the emperor asked about rewarding the Eternal Peace imperial preceptor for his immense contribution. Hu Ling'er cautiously suggested women and wealth. To his surprise, the emperor agreed, though he worried the preceptor might refuse. Hu Ling'er hinted that after everything that had happened, the preceptor would likely accept. Emperor Yangfeng smiled knowingly, praised Hu Ling'er's cleverness, and issued a final warning: do not provoke Qin Mu again. His power was beyond imagination. Shamed and furious, Hu Ling'er withdrew, inwardly raging at the thought that a legendary devil path figure like himself could not contend with a mere youth of the Five Elements realm. Meanwhile, Qin Mu, the very subject of these courtly storms, calmly received 3 imperial decrees in the Imperial College. His new title, Palace Grandee, carried prestige but no real authority. It was clear the emperor still harbored doubts about him as the master of the heavenly devil cult. Qin Mu tossed the decrees aside and returned to cultivation. He focused on the Five Elements realm. Having already mastered the transformations of 4-star sovereigns, only Saturn remained. As he drew in Earth-aligned star force, his body transformed into a towering human-headed serpent. Behind him appeared 2 massive, tightly shut gates, their inscriptions blurred and unreadable. During his cultivation, the form of Saturn Sovereign revealed more secrets. An ancient scroll materialized in his hands, covered in strange symbols resembling insects, fish, sun and moon. It was not any modern script. Even with years of learning under death, Qin Mu had never seen such writing. He noticed the same symbols faintly etched upon the gates behind him. A sense of unease crept into his heart. If every practitioner saw these gates and scrolls, why had no one ever explained them? Why had even the imperial preceptor said nothing? As these thoughts churned, a deep, devilish voice suddenly echoed within him, mocking his confusion. The voice claimed these were the writings of Yudu, far beyond the understanding of a weak mortal. Qin Mu's hair stood on end. He demanded to know who was speaking from inside his body. Acting? The voice laughed. How long are you still going to act in front of me? When I borrowed your eyes to look at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's battle, didn't you recognize me then? Summoner of the ruler of Dushan? Now Qin Mu really felt a bone-chilling cold. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a huge battle at Dashang City, he stood at the mountain peak to observe the battle, but he was unable to see the moves of the strong practitioners. At that time, Qin Mu had believed he was only a distant observer. The battlefield below him was filled with terrifying power, far beyond what his eyes could comprehend. It was only when the Dushan Devil King borrowed his vision that everything became clear. Through that borrowed sight, Qin Mu had seen the profound and terrifying techniques of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Teacher Poor, and the other supreme experts. He had even gained insight into the hidden wonders behind their moves. Qin Mu had thought he concealed his thoughts perfectly. He believed the Dushan Devil King merely used his eyes and then retreated back into silence, unaware of the stirrings in Qin Mu's heart. But now, reality struck him like ice sinking into his bones. Every calculation, every cautious thought he had harbored had long been seen through. The Dushan Devil King mocked him mercilessly, calling him a foolish summoner. In front of the ruler of Dushan, all of Qin Mu's so-called clever tricks were nothing more than childish play. The devil's voice thundered through his mind, filled with absolute confidence and overwhelming pressure. Qin Mu was told plainly that survival meant submission. Worship was his only choice. Instead of panicking, Qin Mu forced himself to calm down. He smiled inwardly and spoke with deliberate composure. He reminded the Dushan Devil King that in the entire world, Qin Mu was now the only one who still understood the ghost-transferring God-dispatching runes command. He was the only one capable of executing that spell. Silence followed. That silence was heavy, stretching just long enough to make Qin Mu's heart pound. When the devil finally spoke again, his tone changed. There was amusement now, even interest. Qin Mu had dared to bargain. Inside, Qin Mu felt far from calm. If this negotiation failed, the consequences would be fatal. The devil's consciousness was attached to his body, carrying terrifying magic power far beyond Qin Mu's own. If the devil decided to turn hostile, Qin Mu would not survive. Yet, if he succeeded, there was hope. He could return to the village and rely on the combined strength of village chief and the others to deal with the Dushan Devil King slowly. From the devil's past behavior, Qin Mu realized something crucial. The Devil King had always been cautious. He hid while Qin Mu was beside Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Old Ma, and Cripple. He only dared to borrow Qin Mu's eyes during battles between supreme experts. This meant one thing: the devil could be threatened. He was not invincible. That realization gave Qin Mu confidence. The Dushan Devil King spoke of his ruined homeland. Dushan was already finished, drowned in endless darkness. He no longer sought conquest. He only wanted a place for his people to survive. That was why he had spread the ghost-transferring God-dispatching runes command to this world. Qin Mu was now the final key. Qin Mu directly asked if the devil wanted him to perform another summoning. The devil answered calmly. He did not wish to cross over himself. This world had its own terrifying experts, and a war between realms would benefit no one. He only wanted Qin Mu to summon some of his people, allowing them to take root quietly. In exchange, the devil promised peace. Qin Mu did not believe a single word, but belief was unnecessary. Survival came first. The devil offered another temptation. He would explain the words engraved on the mysterious gate behind Qin Mu's Saturn sovereign form. Qin Mu immediately countered, claiming his elders might already recognize those words. The devil laughed, explaining that those inscriptions were written in the language of Yudu. Recognition meant nothing without the ability to read them. The scroll Qin Mu had seen, the devil said, contained the spells of Yudu itself. Qin Mu pretended indifference, claiming he had no need for such knowledge. The devil then revealed the truth of the realm Qin Mu stood in. By mastering the words of Yudu, Qin Mu could surpass even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Those words strengthened the soul itself. They were the staircase toward godhood. This shook Qin Mu deeply. He demanded proof. The devil responded calmly, asking if Qin Mu truly did not recognize Soul Guide. Qin Mu realized with shock that Soul Guide originated from Yudu. What mortals used was merely a distorted, weakened version, translated into human runes. True Yudu spells, written in their original language, were incomparably more powerful. Qin Mu recalled the terrifying night by the river, when Soul Guide had summoned a gate of darkness and black mist. If that was only a fragment of Yudu's power, then the true spells were unimaginable. He asked about the messengers of death he had once seen. The devil dismissed them as minor gods under earth count, maintaining order in Yudu. Then came the real question. Did Qin Mu want to learn the language of Yudu? He answered yes without hesitation, putting on an innocent smile. But the devil insisted on conditions. Qin Mu must summon his subjects first. Qin Mu proposed a counterplan, suggesting the devil enter a constructed wooden mechanism and summon his own people. The devil immediately saw through it and rejected the idea. He would not leave Qin Mu's body. He knew that once free, Qin Mu would gather allies and kill him. The tension escalated. Qin Mu pointed out the imbalance. Once the summoning occurred, he would be at the devil's mercy. The devil had never cared about his life before. Silence fell between them again. At last, the Dushan Devil King laughed and acknowledged Qin Mu's sharp mind. He proposed an oath of alliance, enforced by Earth Count himself. Anyone who broke it would have their soul taken away. Qin Mu agreed, warning the devil not to play tricks. Devil language echoed in his mind. Incomprehensible and twisted, Qin Mu understood only part of it and carefully hid his uncertainty. When half of the gate of Yudu appeared and the devil urged him to swear, Qin Mu refused, exposing the trap. The devil laughed again. Impressed, he repeated the oath, adjusting the words. Qin Mu grasped more of it this time, learning as he listened. Finally, Qin Mu suggested using human language instead. The devil fell silent, then cursed him openly, fully aware that Qin Mu had taken advantage of the situation to learn devil language. Dushan Devil King kept quiet for a moment, then scolded him for being as clever as the devil. Stinky brat, you only have a smattering of devil language and took this chance to learn something. Didn't you? If one could understand 40 to 50% of a language, the rest which they didn't understand would become like a ciphertext. According to the words said in front and behind, one could be able to guess the meaning of those coded words. This was exactly the method Qin Mu relied on. At first, he knew nothing about devil language, yet fate had given him fragments. At Goddess Pass in the Great Ruins, he had once heard devil language and memorized its sounds. Later, in Doom Suppression Palace, a sealed devil god had taught him the great freedom mudra, letting him grasp more of that ancient tongue. These fragments, pieced together, became a key. When the Dushan Devil King repeated the oath again and again, Qin Mu listened carefully. The words were pure, ancient, and heavy with power. Each repetition sharpened his understanding. Gods and devils used language as power itself. And by listening 3 times, Qin Mu's mastery grew at an astonishing rate. He realized that if the oath were spoken in human language, he could compare both versions and fully decipher the devil words he still lacked. The Dushan Devil King saw through this intention but had no choice. Killing Qin Mu would mean losing his only anchor. So when Qin Mu asked calmly whether the Devil King still wished to swear the oath, the answer came instantly and coldly. Yes. Using human language, the Dushan Devil King invoked the taboo name of Earth Count. As the words echoed, Qin Mu felt something ancient awaken. A vast power stirred beyond space, surging closer, heavier with each breath. Half of a gate slowly formed within Qin Mu's mind, radiating an oppressive presence. Qin Mu listened to every word, repeating the meaning in his heart again and again, afraid of the slightest mistake. When it was his turn to swear, and he spoke the phrase of submission, his soul trembled violently. An invisible gaze descended upon him, not upon his body, but upon his soul itself. This was Earth Count, an existence ruling all souls, indifferent to flesh and blood, caring only for the spirit. Qin Mu felt that if the oath were broken, this being would descend without hesitation and seize the violator's soul. As the oath completed, the 2 halves of the gate joined together, forming a complete gate of Yudu. Beyond it stretched endless darkness. Below the gate, Qin Mu perceived a radiant stream with 9 bends and 18 curves, widening as it descended like a heavenly river. At its depths lay a cold, emotionless gaze. He realized this was not a river at all, but the horns of Earth Count himself. The so-called 9 pacts were these 9 bends. To break a pact was to shatter a bend and invite the Reaper of Souls. When the vision faded, the gate vanished, and silence returned. Then the Dushan Devil King laughed. His laughter was triumphant. He revealed the trap. Qin Mu had sworn an oath not with his true body, but with a mere consciousness. That consciousness could be destroyed without consequence. The oath bound Qin Mu, not the devil. The Devil King declared that Qin Mu must now serve sincerely, and the promised knowledge of Yudu's words would never be given. Qin Mu stood stunned, staring into nothingness. After a long breath, he murmured calmly that Grandpa Cripple had always taught him to smile while stabbing from behind. He admitted the Devil King was a professional trickster, but said quietly that he himself was not unprepared. His plan was simple: summon the devils, then kill them wave after wave. This did not violate the pact. Now it was the Dushan Devil King's turn to fall silent. Seeing no benefit in mutual destruction, the Devil King changed tactics. He proposed leaving Qin Mu's body entirely and entering a god statue mechanism instead. Once Qin Mu finished building it and summoned the devils, the Devil King would teach him the language of Yudu. Qin Mu agreed instantly, but caught himself just in time. He realized that if he built the statue first without summoning devils, he would violate the oath and lose his soul. The Devil King praised his wit, admitting Qin Mu could survive even in Dushan with such cunning. Qin Mu began preparations. He gathered money and materials, planning to sculpt the statue. During this time, Hu Ling'er lingered anxiously, obsessed with the 1,000 great abundance coins the imperial preceptor still owed them. Day after day, she waited, worried and sleepless. Qin Mu worked tirelessly. He carved wooden statues of devil gods, 5 in total, under the Devil King's guidance. The Devil King laughed, explaining these were rebels among his kind, and summoning them only to kill them would be a delight. Qin Mu forged parts late into the night, using a stolen furnace to smelt winter crystal iron. His noise disturbed the scholars until directorates intervened. He rested briefly, then resumed work. Meanwhile, Hu Ling'er grew increasingly dejected, convinced the debt would never be repaid. On the 4th day, the god statue mechanism was complete. It had 4 heads, 8 arms, movable joints, and countless totem markings. Qin Mu did not let the Devil King enter it yet. At that moment, a knock came. Qin Mu opened the door to find an elderly butler from the imperial preceptor's manor. The rewards from the emperor had arrived. The preceptor had accepted vast riches and palace maids, and now the debts were being repaid. Before Qin Mu could speak, Hu Ling'er flew forward, snatched the coin pouch, and smiled brilliantly. Her long vigil had finally been rewarded. The butler warned Qin Mu to be cautious, speaking of a mysterious thief plaguing the capital, robbing wealthy officials into silence. As he spoke, 2 elders entered scholars' residence, adorned in gold and finery. One of them was a cripple while the other looked like a middle-aged householder. They both seemed rich and imposing. Elder Fu saw the situation and said, "You have visitors, so I won't disturb you any longer. I still have to go return the money to the others' families. 2 of them had too much stolen, so if I don't return money to them, they will probably have to starve from today onwards." After Elder Fu left, Cripple and Old Ma walked in together. Cripple's face was glowing with pride and satisfaction, while Old Ma looked calm and detached, as if worldly wealth meant nothing to him at all. Qin Mu invited the 2 elders to sit and asked where they had been during these past few days. Old Ma explained that Cripple had followed him to Lizhou to deliver disaster relief. The rebellion there had left cities in ruins and people starving everywhere. Cripple laughed and explained that although they looked rich and well-dressed now, everything they wore was fake. The golden chain around his neck was nothing more than gold-plated wood. And even Old Ma's jade pendant was counterfeit. The real valuables had already been pawned off in exchange for rice and flour, all of which had been sent to Lizhou. Members of the Heavenly Devil cult were already helping with relief there, so the 2 elders had entrusted the food and money to them. Qin Mu smiled and remarked that Imperial Physician, you had truly done a good deed this time. When Qin Mu mentioned the matter of summoning devils, Cripple immediately became interested. He asked whether Qin Mu had really encountered a Devil King and whether he had been tricked. Cripple suggested that Old Ma should have handled it instead, since Ma Wangshan possessed 3 eyes and specialized in subduing gods and devils. At that moment, the skin between Old Ma's brows split open, revealing a 3rd eye. A brilliant light shone forth and struck the center of Qin Mu's forehead. From within him came a shrill, miserable scream, threatening that if it were refined to death, Qin Mu would die as well. Qin Mu quickly explained that he had already sworn an alliance oath with the Devil King, bound by a pact of Earth Count. The moment those words were spoken, both Cripple and Old Ma were shaken. Old Ma immediately closed his third eye, his expression turning grave. He scolded Qin Mu for being far too daring. The pact of Earth Count was notoriously treacherous, and Qin Mu had sworn it not with a human, but with a devil god from another world. Cripple shook his head in disbelief, calling Qin Mu reckless and saying that he was gambling with his own life. Qin Mu explained his reason calmly. He wanted to learn the language of Yudu. Cripple replied that such an oath was completely unnecessary. If Qin Mu had handed the devil over to Butcher, the man would have forced everything out of it within a few days. Butcher enjoyed tormenting gods and devils, making them beg for death. Even if that failed, Cripple himself could have taught Qin Mu. Qin Mu could only blush and admit that the pact had already been made and could not be undone. He said he was about to summon devils and asked the two elders for help. Old Ma replied simply that Qin Mu could summon them freely, and they would destroy whatever appeared. Qin Mu went to the Imperial College warehouse and purchased bones needed for the ritual. Because the college taught techniques from many paths, including righteous, devil, and Buddha methods, such materials were always available. He returned to his courtyard, took out his talisman treasure, and began the summoning. The ritual proceeded smoothly. Runes lit up across the devil god sculpture, and dark power gathered. Unlike the catastrophe at Heaven Wave City, this summoning felt weaker, making it clear that the devil god was far inferior to the Dushan Devil King. Above Imperial College, the sky changed. Vast power descended like a black pillar crashing toward scholars' residence. The entire college was alarmed. Directorates, scholars, the Grand Chancellor, and powerful experts across the capital all turned their attention toward the disturbance. Within Qin Mu's courtyard, the wooden statue cracked and expanded as a devilish voice roared, declaring itself the Qiahe devil god from Dushan, come to bring wrath upon the petty world. Before the devil's power could fully descend, a vast Buddha manifestation appeared in the sky. A colossal Buddha sat above Imperial College, raising a palm larger than a hectare. With a single press, the devil god's consciousness was shattered, along with the wooden statue itself. Silence followed. The watching experts were shocked once again, but then reassured. Such a level of Buddhist cultivation was rare even among great monasteries. Imperial College was clearly not to be underestimated. Hu Ling'er rushed over with several directorates. Qin Mu poked his head out and smiled, explaining that a devil god had just appeared and had been beaten to death by his elder. Hu Ling'er forced a smile, warned Qin Mu to be careful, and ordered everyone to disperse. With such an elder present, there would be no danger. The directorates were baffled. Summoning a devil in the capital was a grave crime. Yet Hu Ling'er made no trouble at all. As Hu Ling'er left, cold sweat rolled down his face. He suspected that one of those terrifying elders from the Great Ruins was present. No wonder the Emperor had warned him not to provoke Qin Mu. Devils and monsters were now openly walking into the capital, and peace was becoming fragile. After Qin Mu closed the door, the directorates quickly evacuated the other scholars, warning them that scholars' residence was extremely dangerous. The scholars fled at once, shaken by what they had witnessed. Inside Qin Mu's mind, the Dushan Devil King questioned why he had not summoned the remaining devils. Qin Mu replied calmly that he had fulfilled his promise. Summoning one was still summoning. Now it was the Devil King's turn to teach him the language of Yudu. When the devil hesitated, Qin Mu reminded him that breaking the oath would send him straight to Yudu under Earth Count's judgment. The Dushan Devil King laughed angrily and admitted defeat, but twisted the terms. He would teach only one sentence, not the entire language. He explained that the sentence inscribed on the gate meant, Gate of Earth Origin. Qin Mu was suspicious, sensing that there was something dangerous hidden in those words. Still, he accepted the teaching and practiced the strange sounds, discovering that the language was spoken not through the throat, but through the soul itself. To the Devil King's shock, Qin Mu quickly grasped this method. Once the teaching was complete, Qin Mu told the Dushan Devil King to leave his body and enter the god statue mechanism he had prepared. The Devil King refused at first. Suspecting a trap, Qin Mu then turned to Old Ma and Cripple, saying he would help reattach their limbs. While Qin Mu worked, a spark suddenly flew from his brow and entered the god statue with a hiss. Cripple laughed, saying he would allow the nuisance of a Devil King to run a short distance first. The Devil King took control of the statue and fled, only to have its joints lock up one by one after just a few steps. The entire statue froze in a ridiculous pose. Completely immobilized, a furious voice cursed Qin Mu from within. Hu Ling'er popped her head out, looked at the frozen statue, and laughed brightly. "You see, haven't you been tricked by the mechanism instead? That's right. Do you think young master is a male fox that has turned into a spirit? I think he's a little." Qin Mu reattached Old Ma's arm and Cripple's leg, placing the two elders in the medicinal cauldron. He had boiled a full decoction to cook to the two people while asking Hu Ling'er to maintain the fire beside the cauldron. As the medicine bubbled and steamed, Qin Mu carefully adjusted the herbs, changing the mixture several times to ensure the healing would be complete. Old Ma and Cripple lay calmly in the cauldron, enduring the pain without complaint. Outside, night gradually fell. When Qin Mu stepped out of the courtyard, Scholar's residence was completely deserted. All the scholars had fled to avoid danger. Only one figure remained in the dark alley outside, the Dushan Devil King. Trapped inside the rigid god statue, unable to move, Qin Mu walked up to the statue and opened its abdomen. Inside was a dense maze of gears, cogs, and mechanisms. He reached in and turned several of them. Instantly, the Dushan Devil King felt his legs loosen. Overjoyed, he rushed forward, but after only a few steps, loud clacking sounds rang out again as every joint in his body locked tight once more. "Big dragon, pull him back into the courtyard," Qin Mu said calmly. The dragon Qilin waddled over, bit down on one of the statue's legs, and dragged the furious Devil King back across the ground, tossing him into the corner of the courtyard with a heavy crash. The Dushan Devil King cursed endlessly, shouting insults and demanding Qin Mu fight him fairly. Qin Mu ignored him completely and continued preparing the medicine. When the Devil King attempted to fly, lightning burst across the statue's surface. Brilliant runes lit up, sealing him firmly in place. These were sealing runes from Roland's Golden Palace, secretly carved by Qin Mu during the statue's creation. He had prepared for this moment long ago, unwilling to leave any chance for escape. After finishing the herbs, Qin Mu looked at the Devil King seriously and stated his condition clearly. If the Devil King taught him everything he knew about the language of Yudu, Qin Mu would release him. The Devil King laughed bitterly and refused outright, saying he would never trust Qin Mu again, no matter what promise was offered. Even the suggestion of another pact of Earth Count was met with furious rejection and endless vulgarities. Nearby, Cripple and Old Ma rested comfortably in the medicinal cauldron. Cripple watched the floating golden chain on the surface of the water and glanced toward the Devil King. Laughing softly, he remarked that Qin Mu had truly grown up. They had expected to deal with the Devil King themselves. Yet Qin Mu had handled it alone. Cripple even worried for Qin Mu's future enemies, wondering who had taught him to be so crafty. Old Ma stared at him silently. Cripple laughed awkwardly, asking why Old Ma was looking at him like that. Old Ma calmly explained that he had once been a constable for decades, later serving in the government office of justice before being recruited by Great Thunderclap Monastery. That piercing gaze came from years of judging criminals. Cripple finally understood why he always felt uneasy under Old Ma's stare. They remained in the cauldron through the night, Qin Mu carefully changing the medicine several times. At dawn, Old Ma and Cripple emerged, washed, and joined Qin Mu for breakfast. Afterward, Cripple announced with a smile that they would be leaving. Old Ma said gently that seeing Qin Mu capable of protecting himself put them at ease. Qin Mu insisted on seeing them off. As they descended the mountain, he reminded them to nurse their newly reattached limbs carefully for a year or two. Cripple sighed, admitting he was not used to having his leg back after decades without it. Old Ma felt the same about his arm. At the mountain gate, they told Qin Mu to return home for the new year. He promised solemnly that he would. After leaving the capital, the two elders encountered Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor standing atop the river. Unmoving despite the rushing water, the three exchanged calm words. The Imperial Preceptor requested the Emperor's disc, saying he did not wish to damage their relationship. Cripple admitted he had already given it away, shocking the Imperial Preceptor. After some thought, the man chose not to pursue the matter, concluding that Imperial authority did not depend on a single artifact. Back at Scholar's residence, Qin Mu cleaned the medicinal tools. Hu Ling'er suddenly noticed a jade hoop on the table. Qin Mu recognized it immediately as Cripple's Emperor's disc. He realized Cripple must have deliberately left it behind. After a moment of thought, Qin Mu tied it to his jade pendant, planning to return it later. He then dragged the Dushan Devil King forward once more and adjusted the gears inside the god statue. The Devil King could now move, but refused to do so, threatening Qin Mu with revenge from his true body. Hu Ling'er argued back fiercely, boasting that Qin Mu had countless ways to torment him. Qin Mu agreed calmly, saying 100 methods were far from enough. The Devil King scoffed, claiming fear was impossible after tens of thousands of years of cultivation. Qin Mu tried a gentler approach, suggesting cooperation between fellow practitioners of the Devil Path. When that failed, he threatened to send the Devil King to Hall of Azure Yang to be preached to daily. Even that did not frighten the Devil King, who boasted he could turn monks into devils instead. Finally, the Devil King erupted in frustration, shouting that Qin Mu and Hu Ling'er were already devils by nature. He admitted defeat and demanded to be killed outright. Qin Mu shook his head and said softly, "I'm not that kind of person. Ling'er, let him follow you from now on. I'll teach you how to control this mechanism." Qin Mu taught Hu Ling'er how to control the mechanism. He had left a control station at the chest of Dushan Devil King, and by pushing a secret compartment gently, the control station would automatically pop out. He explained every detail patiently, showing her how the hidden structure worked and how the mechanism responded to subtle movements. The god statue mechanism, forged from winter crystal iron, towered above them like a living deity. It stood nearly 9 yards tall, massive and imposing, its surface cold and dark, radiating an aura of overwhelming power. Qin Mu had paid a tremendous price for it, spending 10,000 Great Abundance coins on the winter crystal iron alone. Inside this enormous body were thousands of intricate components, hundreds of gears meshed together in perfect precision, forming a mechanical system so complex that even master craftsmen would be left in awe. With the control station, the god statue could be forced to move even if Dushan Devil King resisted. It possessed 8 arms and 4 fierce faces, each carved with terrifying expressions, and its defenses were strong enough that ordinary divine arts practitioners would find it nearly impossible to break through. At the heart of the mechanism was a tiny pill furnace. Qin Mu explained that it resembled the one he had once built for xianxia. Though this version was far more refined, his earlier attempt had lacked experience. But now the furnace was smaller, denser, and exquisitely intricate. When Hu Ling'er sat in the control station, she could feed medicinal stones into the furnace and control the flames with her own vital energy. Even without Dushan Devil King, the god statue itself was a terrifying heavy armored weapon. If Dushan Devil King truly treated this mechanism as his own body and fought seriously, the power unleashed would be astonishing. Practitioners at the 6 Directions realm would stand no chance, and even those at the 7 Stars realm could not be certain of victory. Qin Mu reflected calmly that he had not invented anything entirely new. He had simply combined what Mute, Deaf, and Old Ma had taught him. Yet by assembling all these teachings together, he had created a completely new battle method, one worthy of true masters of smithing, mechanics, and runes. Hu Ling'er was overflowing with excitement. She ignored Dushan Devil King entirely and eagerly climbed into the control station to test it. The god statue's arms swung wildly as she squealed with joy. Qin Mu immediately called out for the dragon Qilin to follow her and keep things under control. The dragon Qilin lumbered after her, its round belly nearly scraping the ground. Watching its back, Qin Mu sighed. Once, This dragon Qilin had looked majestic even when starving, frightening all who saw it. But after following Qin Mu, it never missed a single scarlet fire spirit pill and drank freely from the Jade Dragon River. Now it had grown so fat that it was in danger of becoming nothing more than a rolling meatball. Qin Mu muttered that it was clearly time for a diet. After ensuring everything was stable, Qin Mu focused inward. He steadied his breathing and activated the Overlord body technique once more. His form transformed into Saturn's sovereign. With a human head and the body of a giant serpent, a mysterious scroll appeared in his hand, and behind him, a gate slowly materialized. Turning around, Qin Mu spoke in the ancient language of Yudu, the strange and haunting words Dushan Devil King had taught him. As the words echoed, the gate gradually opened, revealing endless darkness beyond. Qin Mu froze. Walking around it, he saw that he was still standing in his courtyard. The gate itself was impossibly thin, like a sheet of darkness with no thickness at all. Yet when he stood directly before it, the darkness seemed boundless and infinite. He cautiously extended his hand into the gate, but felt nothing unusual. Doubt crept into his mind. Was this the marvel of the Five Elements realm? Did others have such a gate as well? And if so, had anyone ever entered it and returned? As hesitation lingered, a faint light appeared within the darkness. A small boat emerged, drifting silently toward him. A dim lamp hung from its bow, casting ghostly light. On the boat sat an elderly man, calmly folding paper humans and paper horses. The scene was eerily tranquil. Qin Mu leaned forward, and the elder lifted the lamp, shining it directly at him. Instantly, Qin Mu felt his soul freeze. Unable to move, when the lamp was lowered again, he finally breathed out in relief. But then terror struck. He looked down and realized he was standing on the boat beside the elder. The boat turned slowly, drifting away. Qin Mu turned his head and saw, far away, the gate glowing faintly. In front of it stood his own body, motionless and empty. His heart turned ice cold. His soul had been taken. The body by the gate was nothing more than a shell. He demanded to know why his soul had been taken while he was still alive. But the elder ignored him, continuing to fold paper figures. Panic surged as the gate grew more distant. Realizing Dushan Devil King had deceived him, Qin Mu leapt from the boat, hoping to return to his body. Instead of water, there was only endless darkness. He flailed helplessly, sinking deeper and deeper. Above him, the boat's light faded until it vanished completely. Despair threatened to swallow him. In that moment, Qin Mu gathered every ounce of strength and shouted in the language of Yudu, crying out with his soul itself. The sound echoed impossibly through the darkness. An ancient voice answered, chanting words filled with solemn power, like a primordial sacrifice offered to a god bearing the weight of the world. Suddenly, Qin Mu felt himself pulled upward. Faster and faster he rose, until he became a streak of light that shot back through the darkness and into his body before the gate. He gasped violently, drenched in sweat, as though dragged back from drowning. Behind him, the boat reappeared briefly. The elder did not raise the lamp this time. Qin Mu asked about the meaning of the words he had spoken. As the boat drifted away, the elder explained that the words described Earth as the great origin, the foundation that gives birth to all things and receives the influence of heaven. Had Qin Mu spoken them sooner, his soul would not have been taken. The elder finally revealed the truth. This gate was not the gate of Earth origin, but the gate of heaven influence of Yudu. Ghosts could pass through it, but living beings should not. As the boat vanished, Qin Mu laughed bitterly. Dushan Devil King had tried to harm him, yet he had survived. More than that, he realized his soul had grown stronger. The gate of heaven influence was nourishing it, stabilizing his cultivation. Even through deception, Dushan Devil King had spoken some truth. Mastering this gate would perfect Qin Mu's realm and elevate him beyond others. As his soul settled, Qin Mu looked again at the scroll in his hand. The markings upon it became clearer, forming strange symbols shaped like birds, beasts, fish, the sun and the moon. Even though he didn't recognize them, his gaze swept past them as though he knew what they meant. The marvel of the words on the scroll then automatically became part of his knowledge. There weren't many words on the scroll, and Qin Mu gave the writing a quick once-over. Instantly, various types of cultivation logic regarding the soul appeared in his mind. The moment Qin Mu absorbed the contents of the scroll, countless insights surged into his consciousness. They were not simple techniques, but profound principles explaining how the soul was nurtured, stabilized, and strengthened. Only then did he fully realize that Dushan Devil King had lied once again. There were no direct spells of Yudu recorded on the scroll at all. The so-called soul spells were merely an afterthought. The true value of the scroll lay in fortifying the soul itself, laying an unshakable foundation for future cultivation. Qin Mu could not help but mock the Devil King inwardly. Among everything Dushan Devil King had said, perhaps only the ancient language of Yudu was true. Everything else had been deliberate deception. Still, Qin Mu did not regret it. Lies or not, the gains were real. He memorized the words on the scroll and closed it, entering deep meditation. As he pondered, he compared the principles within the scroll to the soul-related techniques he already knew. The great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures contained soul cultivation logic. The barbarian empire had its own soul arts. Old Ma's Thunderclap 8 strikes and the Devil Race's Great Freedom Mudra were techniques that struck directly at the soul. There was also the soul guide of the 9 Spectres sect, a terrifying art of even higher level. By comparing these systems and matching the runes and principles together, Qin Mu sensed that his own power could undergo another transformation. He rose and stepped into the courtyard, his movements slow and deliberate. With every step and gesture, he merged the ancient words of Yudu into one specific move of Thunderclap 8 strikes. Sunshine refining Yang's soul in the sky. This was originally one of the strongest techniques in Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, refined through countless generations to near perfection. Yet now, Qin Mu was pushing it even further. He had never cultivated Rulai's Mahayana Sutra directly. However, after the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures fused with the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and unified all his arts, Thunderclap 8 strikes had grown increasingly formidable, no weaker than that of true Mahayana practitioners. Punch after punch was unleashed. His fist formed the heart seal. The heart seal transformed into a blazing sun. Each strike rumbled like thunder, radiating the scorching intensity of sunlight. This move did little to physical bodies. Its true target was the soul. As Qin Mu repeated the technique, something changed. A strange flame began to seep from his fist seal. This was not ordinary fire, but karma fire, a flame that burned the soul itself. With every punch, the karma fire intensified, until it resembled a blazing red sun surrounding his fist. The more he practiced, the more natural it felt, until an uncontrollable howl escaped his throat. Suddenly, a massive sun-like explosion erupted in the sky above the courtyard. Karma fire surged in all directions, flooding the entire area in crimson flames. Qin Mu halted, drew back his stance, and exhaled slowly. At that moment, his heart stirred. He turned and opened the door, seeing Sword Hall Master rushing toward him with urgency written across his face. Heavenly King Lu is severely injured, Sword Hall Master said gravely. He is at my place now. He wants to see you. His condition is extremely bad. Qin Mu's heart clenched. Without delay, he followed Sword Hall Master. Heavenly King Lu lay on the bed, his clothes torn, blood staining his white hair and beard. He tried to rise but failed. Qin Mu examined him carefully, his expression darkening with every breath. The injuries were horrifying. Heavenly King Lu had clearly fought several experts at the cult master level. His physical body was shattered, his divine treasures heavily damaged, and worst of all, his soul was on the verge of collapse. Of his 7 great divine treasures, some were petrified, others destroyed. The divine bridge was broken. The higher realms of cultivation had completely crumbled. And he was old. His body could no longer contain his failing soul. Heavenly King Lu struggled to speak, revealing that he had traced Heavenly King Qian's whereabouts, only to discover that Qian was already dead. Someone had used Qian's belongings to lure him into an ambush. Qin Mu stopped him from talking further and immediately administered dragon saliva to stabilize his body, hastily writing prescriptions and ordering Sword Hall Master to gather rare herbs. Even as his physical wounds showed signs of recovery, his soul worsened rapidly. Heavenly King Lu revealed that his attackers were after the sacred cult's teleportation art. Among them was a first-ranking imperial official, someone who had mastered the spirit treasure unmovable meditation technique to its peak. Qin Mu recognized the name Sun Nantuo, the Crown Prince's Grand Preceptor. Without hesitation, Qin Mu sealed Heavenly King Lu's soul within his body using secret techniques of the Heavenly Devil cult. He even employed a forbidden art meant for flaying flesh, repurposing it as a desperate life-saving method. Still, the soul continued to disperse. Heavenly King Lu smiled weakly. He knew the truth. He had reached the end. As his divine treasures collapsed one by one, blazing sacred fire erupted from his body. His soul was being shredded beyond recovery. In the flames, Heavenly King Lu murmured calmly about impermanence, about inevitable partings, about his regret at not seeing the sacred cult flourish again. He spoke of Saint Arrival Mountain and the sacred teacher tree, memories drifting like smoke. "I am very cold," he whispered at last. Qin Mu reached out, but all he grasped was ash. When the fire died down, only gray-white ashes remained. Sword Hall Master returned with armfuls of herbs, only to drop them in silence. The towering man knelt, shoulders trembling, unable to make a sound. Qin Mu gathered the ashes into a green jar, standing before it in silence. Somewhere along the way, he realized that the Heavenly Devil cult had truly become his own. And now, one of its pillars was gone. His gaze sharpened. He ordered Sword Hall Master to investigate Sun Nantuo completely. Every detail of his life, family, and sect. Heavenly King Lu was to be buried beside the sacred teacher tree, as he had wished. Later, Qin Mu went to the floor of Heavenly Record, studying the spirit treasure unmovable meditation technique without rest for 2 days and nights. When Sword Hall Master finally delivered the full dossier, Qin Mu read every page in silence. Sword Hall Master had waited beside him quietly through it all, and after some time, Qin Mu opened his eyes and said, "Nantuo Monastery, Sun Nantuo, spirit treasure unmovable meditation technique. The impact would be too huge if we eliminated his whole family in the capital city. So we'll do it outside. Sword Hall, inform the 12 cult protector elders and the 8 supervisors of our sacred cult to wait beside Mud River outside the capital city." Qin Mu closed the thick dossier in his hands, his expression calm but cold. He handed Sword Hall Master a separate set of notes he had written after carefully studying the spirit treasure unmovable meditation technique. These notes recorded its flaws and weaknesses in detail. Qin Mu instructed Sword Hall to distribute them among the elders and supervisors so they could familiarize themselves with the technique in advance. All Hall Masters were ordered to remain in place and await further instructions. This was not a reckless move, but a carefully laid plan. After Sword Hall Master departed, Qin Mu summoned Hu Ling'er and the dragon Qilin. He instructed them to remain quietly within the Imperial College for the next few days and not to act on their own. Once everything was arranged, Qin Mu left Scholar's residence and went to the end of the alley, where he found Wei Yang. He casually asked whether Duke Wei had returned from quelling the rebellion. Upon hearing that Duke Wei had indeed returned a few days earlier, Qin Mu smiled faintly and asked Wei Yang to pass on a message. He told him to inform Duke Wei that something interesting would soon happen at Nantuo Monastery. When Wei Yang pressed for details, Qin Mu only replied that Duke Wei would understand once he arrived. They parted ways, and Qin Mu went alone to Rain Listening Pavilion in Flower Alley. Fu Qingyun hurried out to greet him, but Qin Mu raised his hand to stop her from speaking. In front of her eyes, cracking sounds erupted from his body as his bones shifted. His body grew taller and leaner, his features changing until he looked like a barbarian from beyond the Great Wall. A faint golden light radiated from his body as his clothing transformed into rough robes suited to a prairie warrior. He then took out the Thousand Banners pagoda from his storage treasure. The pagoda spun slowly in his hand, releasing metallic sounds and faint Buddhist chanting from within. Qin Mu instructed Fu Qingyun to stay behind and not interfere unless ordered. Dragging the massive pagoda behind him, Qin Mu walked out of Flower Alley and headed straight for Nantuo Side Palace. Nantuo Side Palace was once the residence of the Crown Prince's Grand Preceptor and now served as the main preaching ground of Nantuo Monastery. Sun Nantuo, an eminent monk of the Buddhist path, had pledged allegiance to the imperial court, bringing Nantuo Monastery under imperial authority. He was known as an upright arhat who hated evil intensely and openly scolded officials of the devil path in court. Yet beneath this righteous surface, Nantuo Side Palace was filled with moral decay. Young monks mingled freely with noblewomen under the guise of Buddhist worship. Scandals were common, but Sun Nantuo turned a blind eye, burdened by official duties and constrained by his own half-secular status. Though his disciples were morally questionable, his reputation for justice remained intact. That day, chaos erupted outside Nantuo Side Palace. Monks rushed out shouting that a priceless Buddhist treasure had appeared. The lost legacy treasure of Nantuo Monastery, the Thousand Banners Pagoda, had resurfaced. Crowds flooded the streets. Monks, nobles, and curious onlookers gathered as they beheld the towering pagoda, formed from 1,000 jade banners, each carved with scriptures and embedded with precious relics. The pagoda radiated Buddhist might. As it was activated, each banner expanded to several yards in length, causing the entire structure to soar to a staggering height. The rotating scripture cylinders glowed brilliantly, and Buddhist chants echoed through the air. Standing beneath the pagoda was a young barbarian man. His voice rang out clearly as he declared himself a shaman from Roland's golden palace beyond the Great Wall. He claimed the pagoda had been passed down through his family after his ancestor rescued an old monk centuries ago. Now, he had come to Eternal Peace Empire to seek a destined person worthy of this treasure. The monks of Nantuo Monastery were shaken. Senior brother Yuan Jing, a direct disciple of Sun Nantuo, confirmed that this was indeed their lost legacy treasure. Unable to restrain himself, Yuan Jing accused the barbarian and demanded the pagoda be returned. Qin Mu, disguised as the barbarian, calmly replied that the treasure belonged to him now and would only be given to a fated person. Another monk, Yuan Feng, also a disciple of Sun Nantuo and Yuan Jing's rival, asked how such fate would be determined. Qin Mu answered plainly, if anyone of the same cultivation realm could defeat him, he would willingly hand over the Thousand Banners Pagoda. At that moment, Duke Wei and Wei Yang arrived nearby. Duke Wei laughed loudly, announcing his presence to half the capital, mocking the monks and questioning where Sun Nantuo was hiding. His booming voice attracted even more nobles and officials, turning the confrontation into a public spectacle. The monks could no longer act secretly. Yuan Jing stepped forward, eager to claim the treasure and prove himself. He declared his name and cultivation level. Qin Mu responded with equal formality, giving a false name and stating he was also at the Five Elements realm. Yuan Jing unleashed Spirit Treasure Unmovable Meditation Technique. Radiant light burst from his body as a massive Buddhist apparition manifested behind him. 1,000 armed Buddha wielding countless treasures merged into his form. Yuan Jing struck with a colored glaze mudra, forming a shining domain of Buddhist light filled with chanting. Qin Mu did not retreat. He simply raised his palm and brought it down. A thunderous explosion followed. The colored glaze domain shattered instantly. The Buddhist apparition collapsed. The ground caved in, forming a massive crater. Yuan Jing was reduced to a crushed, lifeless mass within the pit. Shock rippled through the crowd. The monks recoiled in terror. Duke Wei narrowed his eyes, stroking his beard as suspicion crept into his expression. The barbarian's move was crude yet overwhelmingly powerful, far beyond what it should have been. Wei Yang answered Duke Wei's quiet question, confirming the barbarian's name. Wei Yang immediately said, I think it was Ponggong So. Duke Wei muttered to himself, this doesn't look right. This technique doesn't look like part of Grand Shaman Ruda scriptures. Could this Ponggong So have changed the Grand Shaman Ruda scriptures? Duke Wei was puzzled and muttered, I've fought with experts from Roland's Golden Palace before and their techniques required souls to cultivate. Duke Wei stood among the crowd, his brows tightly knitted. From his long years of battle and political struggle, he could immediately tell that something was off. The shamans of Roland's Golden Palace he had encountered before relied heavily on soul cultivation. Their bodies could be refined to a dazzling golden state, but their true killing methods were rooted in soul attacks, curses, and spiritual suppression. Yet the young barbarian before them, Pang Gong So, fought in a completely different way. Every strike was direct, brutal, and overwhelmingly physical, as if his flesh itself were a divine weapon. His methods resembled the grand shaman Ruda scriptures, but they were far fiercer, more domineering, as though the scriptures had been reshaped into a path of pure corporeal slaughter. Duke Wei could sense the familiarity, yet also the difference. However, even with his insight as a top-tier expert, he could not see the truth. What Qin Mu was using was not the genuine grand shaman Ruda scriptures at all, but the heavenly god creation technique, one of the 7 writings of creation. This technique allowed its user to imitate other cultivation systems to the point of near perfection. In the past, Granny C had used it to impersonate Fu Yundi, fooling countless experts. Now, Qin Mu was doing the same, disguising his true foundation beneath the guise of a barbarian shaman. On the battlefield before Nantuo Side Palace, monk Yuan Jing was already dead, crushed into the ground with a single palm. Fury surged through the monks. Another monk, Yuan Shan, stepped forward, shouting accusations about stolen treasures and unjust slaughter. Before he could even finish his declaration, Qin Mu reached out and grabbed the air. Thunder crackled, invisible yet terrifying. Yuan Shan collapsed instantly, his body intact, his heart still beating, but his soul had already been seized and extinguished. When the monks rushed to check him, Qin Mu spoke coldly, explaining that the soul had been destroyed. The monks erupted in outrage, shouting that this was supposed to be a test of strength, not a massacre. Qin Mu answered indifferently that beyond the Great Wall, once someone made a move, life and death were no longer discussed. He mocked their fear of death and declared that none of them were worthy of the 1,000 Banners Pagoda. With that, he even threatened to return the treasure to Roland's Golden Palace, humiliating them further. Another monk charged forward, swinging a heavy staff adorned with 9 rings and treasures. The clanging sound shook the souls of those nearby. Qin Mu did not dodge. He allowed the staff to strike his head, then casually seized it, ripping it from the monk's grip. The monk's hands were torn bloody. With a simple throw, Qin Mu sent the staff back through the monk's chest, pinning him lifeless to the ground. Duke Wei shook his head, openly mocking Nantuo Monastery. To him, these monks had long grown soft, indulging in luxury and reputation rather than true cultivation. Their defeat was inevitable. Still, he could not shake the unease. The shaman arts he knew could indeed destroy souls. But Qin Mu's movements were unfamiliar, almost as if a new divine art had been created. As chaos spread, the monks realized brute force would not work. They sent messengers to the Supreme Court to summon the authorities, and another to the Crown Prince Side Palace to invite Sun Nantuo himself. Their plan was clear. If the Imperial Court intervened, Qin Mu could be arrested, and the 1,000 Banners Pagoda would return to Nantuo Monastery without further bloodshed. Within the Crown Prince Side Palace, Sun Nantuo listened in silence as the monk reported the situation. He criticized his disciples for their moral decay, admitting they deserved defeat, yet insisted that the legacy treasure must be reclaimed. The Crown Prince, however, was cautious. With Heavenly Devil cult recently losing 2 heavenly kings and rumors of a new cult master circulating, he suspected a trap. Sun Nantuo revealed crucial information. The new cult master of Heavenly Devil cult was none other than Qin Mu, an imperial academician of the Imperial College, now a 5th-ranking palace grandee. The revelation shocked the Crown Prince, who immediately grew more vigilant. Nevertheless, he followed Sun Nantuo to witness Pang Gong So personally. When the Supreme Court officials arrived, Duke Wei loudly invoked the old rule separating the Imperial Court from the martial world, effectively blocking official interference. His booming voice forced Sun Nantuo and the Crown Prince to step forward. As more high-ranking officials gathered, many of whom secretly enjoyed seeing Nantuo Monastery humiliated. Meanwhile, Qin Mu continued killing monks with ruthless efficiency. One middle-aged monk proposed a desperate strategy. they would send out a stronger monk, sealing his 6 directions divine treasure at first, then unsealing it mid-fight to deliver a fatal blow. Monk Yuan Kong accepted the task. His cultivation far surpassed the earlier challengers, his body resembling a towering 1,000-armed Buddha. The moment the two clashed, thunder roared, their fists met, and violent gales exploded outward. In an instant, Yuan Kong's bones shattered, he collapsed, dead before he could even unseal his hidden power. Duke Wei applauded loudly, praising the might of the so-called Grand Shaman Ruda scriptures. Sun Nantuo, however, frowned deeply. He had never seen such techniques before. The Crown Prince recalled that shamans were said to transform into monstrous forms, half human and half demon, relying on soul power rather than pure physical dominance. As if to answer this thought, another monk charged in, unsealing his 6 directions divine treasure immediately. His strength surged, and he unleashed more than 400 mudras in rapid succession. Radiant Buddha light flooded the area, and the crowd cried out in admiration. Then Qin Mu transformed. His body twisted into a godly form with a bull's head, a human torso, and bull hooves. Golden light covered him as he stepped upon phantom dragons. A vertical eye opened on his brow, releasing a streak of flame that sliced cleanly through Monk Yuan Yu's neck. The monk's head flew into the crowd, landing in the arms of an infatuated noblewoman, who screamed and fainted on the spot. Qin Mu's tail swayed casually, smacking his own buttocks twice, leaving red marks, as if mocking everyone present. Eternal Peace Crown Prince's gaze flickered, and he said, "It should be the Grand Shaman Ruda scriptures of Roland's Golden Palace." However, why did he have to smack his own buttocks? Is this some bizarre spell from Roland's Golden Palace? Duke Wei saw Qin Mu returning back to his normal form and was slightly bewildered. He looked towards the Imperial Preceptor's manor and thought to himself, Imperial Preceptor, that cold fellow, seems to have cultivated a similar technique before. Duke Wei narrowed his eyes as Qin Mu's terrifying god form faded away and his body returned to that of an ordinary young barbarian. A vague sense of familiarity stirred in his heart. He vaguely remembered that the Imperial Preceptor had once displayed a similar transformation long ago. Something equally strange and profound. Yet before Duke Wei could think too deeply, his attention shifted. The Imperial Preceptor himself had not appeared at all. Duke Wei muttered inwardly, half suspicious, half amused, wondering if the old fox had truly gone off traveling with the palace maids granted by the Emperor. Nearby, Sun Nantuo was also filled with doubt. He hesitated, questioning whether Ponggong So was truly a disciple of Roland's Golden Palace. That sacred ground beyond the Great Wall was infamous for its shamans who cultivated souls, reshaped their bodies into forms neither human nor demon, and practiced heretical spells. Yet what Qin Mu had displayed was not a demon transformation, but a god transformation, something exceedingly rare even among 5 Elements realm practitioners. Sun Nantuo knew very well how difficult it was to cultivate such a transformation. Even the Imperial Preceptor himself had once remarked that the Imperial College did not lack teachings, but rather lacked students capable of reaching this level. Qin Mu's transformation was even more terrifying. His body, vital energy, spirit, and soul all seemed to have ascended together, forming a complete divine state. The bull's eye that opened between his brows, the divine flame that severed a monk's head in a single flash. These were not ordinary techniques. They were manifestations of a true god transformation. Yet none of the onlookers could see this truth. To them, Qin Mu's methods were merely bizarre and ferocious techniques of Roland's Golden Palace. Duke Wei openly mocked Sun Nantuo, urging him to challenge Qin Mu personally to salvage the reputation of Nantuo Monastery. He deliberately pointed out how humiliating it was for monks of higher realms to be slaughtered by someone in the 5 Elements realm. Sun Nantuo remained silent. He knew that Duke Wei was provoking him. Fighting Qin Mu at the same realm would be extremely dangerous, and if he were forced to use higher cultivation, Duke Wei would certainly spread the news everywhere. More importantly, Sun Nantuo sensed something else. Such a bold gate-blocking act could not happen without a guardian lurking nearby. An expert of cult master level, Only by finding and killing this hidden guardian could he truly resolve the crisis and restore faith. When Sun Nantuo finally stepped forward, the monks of Nantuo Monastery were filled with anticipation. Qin Mu stood calmly outside the side palace, corpses already dragged away, his expression indifferent. Over 10 monks had died, yet none dared to approach him now. Sun Nantuo accused Qin Mu of stealing the Thousand Banners pagoda and blocking the gate. Qin Mu calmly denied blocking the gate, stating he had merely come to sell the treasure to a fated person. Anyone could challenge him, and anyone who won could take the pagoda. If Sun Nantuo had the ability, he was welcome to try. The Eternal Peace Crown Prince stepped in, smiling warmly, and asked for the price. Qin Mu named it without hesitation: 100 flying ships staffed with apothecaries and medicine boys, and 200 cloud chariots. The smile vanished from the Crown Prince's face. These were military armaments. Selling them beyond the Great Wall was treason. Qin Mu simply replied that if the price could not be paid, then the business was over. He then declared he would remain for 3 days. If no one defeated him, he would leave for the Great Wall. Sun Nantuo secretly rejoiced, believing 3 days were enough to locate the hidden guardian. Night soon fell. Lanterns illuminated the capital as the night markets opened. Duke Wei and Wei Yang wandered through the bustling streets, discussing cultivation and observing the festive scene. When they passed Nantuo Side Palace again, Duke Wei was startled to find Qin Mu gone. Monks were rushing out, reporting that the barbarian had escaped under cover of the night market. Sun Nantuo immediately ordered pursuit, intending to act outside the city where no one would witness what happened. Duke Wei's eyes gleamed with interest. He followed along, amused by Sun Nantuo's hypocrisy. The group moved beyond the capital, guided by monks who kept reporting Qin Mu's whereabouts. Surprisingly, even outside the city walls, the night market continued. Lanterns burned brightly for miles. They soon reached a village with a massive wooden gate, above which hung a red sign bearing 4 words: Teachings of Sacred Teacher. Duke Wei froze. His expression turned grim. He recognized those words. Long ago, when the former cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult had traveled, the same phrase had hung at his gate. The sacred teacher was coming to teach. This entire night market was a trap laid by Heavenly Devil Cult. Before Duke Wei could react, elders stepped forward to block his path. At that very moment, the night market exploded into violence. Peddlers, scholars, and passers-by suddenly revealed their true identities. In a single breath, all the monks of Nantuo Monastery were assassinated. Heads flew into the air, blood spraying across the lantern-lit streets. Sun Nantuo roared and manifested his 1,000-armed Buddha, towering hundreds of yards tall, radiating dazzling light. Yet before he could strike, more than 20 elders attacked him simultaneously. With a thunderous crash, the Buddha shattered, and Sun Nantuo was annihilated on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the night market returned to normal. Corpses were dragged away, blood washed from the ground, and laughter and hawking resumed as if nothing had happened. Teachings of Sacred Teacher. Duke Wei remembered this phrase and shuddered. He immediately said, "Let's go and not see the true face of this devil cult master." Suddenly, Wei Yang waved toward the village with a smile. "Brother Qin, why are you here?"